All right, it says it's still waiting to. Finally, now it says I'm going live. Okay, we had an initial bump, an initial problem. Share, cool. We had an initial problem in getting the stream set up. It looks like we have unboomered it. So if you folks are having any issues, do let me know. But I think that we are settled. Check out the new Unearthed Arcana playtest. Do I want to mention 235 plus people? Yes. And I can't be stopped. Alright. Somebody tell me that I'm transmitting properly here. There are people in here. Cool. New folks coming in. Exactly what I like to see. Connect. Come on, go ahead. Authoritative Anne. We're just going to call you Anne. Hello. Good to see you. Okay. So, good afternoon, Mr. Baker's Dozen. Mr. Baker's Dozen, when did I see you last? I can't quite remember. But anyways, what I think I'm gonna do, is I think I'm just gonna drag all of this stuff over here. And that's probably okay. Yeah, and then we're gonna open up it up on my second monitor so that I can look this up. No, I don't think we are. I think we're just gonna use that second monitor for something else later. In fact, if I had to pick the best option, I'm probably going to put OBS on the second monitor. The stream with those two losers, I believe. Yes, I think it was then. They might be making an appearance on this stream, depending on how funny they get. Or depending on how funny things are. Let's see here. Sources. Playtest 5. We download the PDF, you guys should all be seeing. Player's Handbook, Playtest 5, because it's no longer 1D&D, except it is... Oh, that clap probably didn't sound great on the microphone. But the playtest is no longer being called 1D&D, except, of course, on... That should be start time 7, so that's just not working there. Alright, that's fine. Whatever. It's still referred to as 1D&D on the D&D Beyond website, I believe. But, yeah, compendium images, /1D&D, you get the idea. But, that's probably not important. I'm just gonna go straight off into these, after I check who's in the chat. So, Durian, I know, is letting his computer run, and I can't... Yeah, who else do we have in the chat with this? I know we have Anne, we got Baker's Dozen. Who else do we have in here? Six of Swords, always good to see you. Power level. So going over the document, what's new? Just while folks are checking in, what's new is weapons. New options for weapons appear here for you to try out. Spells. More spells are ready for playtesting. Feats. Several epic boon feats. And the Weapon Master feat appear here for your feedback. 5 classes. 5 classes are ready for playtesting. Jeez. Barbarian, Fighter, Sorcerer, Warlock, and Wizard. Each of those subclasses also includes a subclass. The Monk will appear in a future Unearthed Arcana along with revised versions of other classes. This is playtest material. Power level, the character options you read here might be more. Why did they say might? Might be more or less powerful than options in 2014's. Why didn't they just say, hey, by the way, we're overtuning this, or we're undertuning this intentionally? All boring. Weapons! Now we get to the actual juice. This is a 50-page... I didn't realize this was a 50-page document. We might not be going through it all today. I had to guess we're definitely not... What is that noise? Give me a moment. Oh, that's weird. There was a cat misbehaving. So, my plan for today is to go through the weapons, spells, and one of the classes that have been presented here. Most likely the wizard. I think wizard is going to be the one that we do. I am on the fence about this. I might do a full video on this week. I'm very much split because, well, actually, no, if I do video, it's probably going to be a short one on an individual section of content in here that I particularly take issue with. Probably. It's probably not going to be... WotC has a failing track record insofar as pleasing me in any fashion, any way, shape, or form, so it's probably not going to be something that I'm terribly excited about. I'm probably going to cover... So, like I said, I'm probably going to cover something that I hated. That's something in here. Weapons, but yes, we're going to go over the weapons today. We're going to go over probably Wizard. I hear the Warlock got super nerfed. That's a little disappointing. And Eldritch Blast was a little funky, but it's never encouraging to hear something like that. So let's get started. Let's go through the weapons. This section contains playtest versions of weapons appearing in the player's handbook. Here you'll find weapon tables, several revised weapon properties, and a new type of property, mastery properties. When we revisit the experts and priests in future Unearthed Arcana articles, some of them will gain access to these special properties. One thing I'm going to lead off with is looking at the weapon tables, looking at how they updated these and the properties they gave them. WotC should have made this the first release. The first release should have been general rules that appear in the player's handbook that were going to be adjusted, modified, to help showcase the direction that 1D&D was going in. Because I think the first one that we got was character origins and stuff like that, and that's... If you lead off with player options, I don't know what kind of context those player options are taking place in. I don't know if, when I'm looking at character origins, if I'm looking at how I build my ancestry in something like 5th edition, I'm not sure, I can't be sure if this means that either more things are going to be, let's say that characters are going to get more features, because character ancestries have more features on the D&D, on the Unearthed Arcana playtest. Maybe it means that classes are having less features, but some of them are getting shifted over. I have no idea what it says about the direction of 1D&D, so maybe I would like it if I'm getting more features from how they handle ancestry in the UA document. Maybe I will like it, but maybe I will only like it if it's not taking away from stuff that I get in classes. If I hear that I'm getting more stuff in classes and in my ancestry, I'm going to really like that, but I can't give that feedback. Because we have no idea. So, designer weapon updates. Here are the new elements in this weapons section. Yeah, apparently they did do Warlock Sturdy. That's what I keep hearing. Each weapon now has a mastery property, especially property that requires a feature to unlock. The mastery properties are described in this document. Short sword has returned to being a martial weapon. The net, which doesn't deal damage, is now adventuring gear rather than a weapon. Interesting choice. See adventuring gear below for this item's playtest description. The Trident's damage die has been changed from 1d6 to 1d8, and its versatile die is now 1d10 rather than 1d8. That's interesting as far as underwater combat goes, which is not a common feature of D&D, sadly. The Lance now has the heavy and two-handed properties rather than the special property, which impose disadvantage on some of its attack rolls, and its damage die has changed from 1d12 to 1d10. This is deeply stupid. Without, maybe, I'm going to put a caveat here in. There's a child crying outside. Apologies for the description. Yes, indeed. How does somebody wield it while riding? Now, maybe if we scroll down, they will have a special rule that allows you to wield it one-handed while riding. But as it is, a lance is really not a two-handed weapon, especially while you're riding, which is why it exists. If you want a two-handed polearm, there is already the halberd, the glaive, and the pike, which already have a d10 damage die. Choice, the war pick now has the versatile property. I find that interesting. The musket and pistol, which previously appeared in the Dungeon Master's Guide, now appear in the martial weapons range table. As always, the DM oversees what is available for purchase in shops. The light property now appears in the weapon properties section rather than in the glossary. I wasn't aware of that. Hello, Ranos. How do they do riding combat in 5e? You buy a horse, and your horse dies 2 rounds in your next combat. And once you do that, you never do mounted combat ever again. That's how they handle mounted combat. The throne property now allows you to draw a weapon as part of the ranged attack. Okay, I should comment on this. This is cool. This is kind of neat. Drawing weapons, throwing weapons, and stuff like that. Not really a huge feature of 5th edition, by and large, but there are some people who've been clamoring for it for a long time, and it's nice, out of the entire 1D&D playtest, to see a single note, just one, where WotC has decided a note of community support, listening to feedback. I'm happy that in the entirety of these now 5 playtest documents, WotC has decided a little bit of community support could be added as a treat, just as a sprinkle on top. That sure says, Gelatinous Rube, I remember talking to you on Discord. And also, hello, Ranos. Let's see here. Authoritative News Network says that means they'll be cutting back on the fighting styles as that came out in Tasha's. No, so fighting styles are part of 5th edition to begin with. New fighting styles, I believe, did not appear in the game until until Tasha's. I could be wrong about that, but I don't think there were new ones in Xanathar's. And I don't think that they're doing away with the fighting styles. As I recall, they have still appeared in the expert. No. So I don't know if they've appeared in the experts. You know, there's an easy way to figure this out. I scroll down. I can't believe I didn't notice. Yeah, Barbarian. Armor training. Rage. Do you get weapon mastery? Your training. X's. Weapon drills. Mastery properties. Oh, shoot. Oh, God. Maybe they did get rid of it. No. Okay, so fighting style. You still get a fighting style. Weapon masteries just get attached to it. So I just know that from looking in the fighter table. I look down at class features, I see fighting style over here, and I see weapon mastery at 1st level. So fighter is shaping up to be a good 1st level dip as always, or 1 level dip, I should say. Authoritative News Network says, sorry, I meant the thrown weapon fighting style. You draw a weapon that has the thrown property as part of the attack you make with the weapon. Yes, that was in Tasha's. And it looks like they've just wrapped that into the thrown property to begin with, because it probably wasn't worth giving up a fighting style. So, these are mastery. Okay, so the only thing I'm going to focus in here are the masteries where they label these things. It's interesting to me. Let's see here. Dagger still has, yeah, so it looks like all of these have a mastery. Slow, nick, push, vex, sap, flex, topple, raise, cleave. I believe those are the only weapon masteries. We'll see if I correctly spotted those. Are they attached to musket? 1d12 piercing, loading, two-handed. No special rules for firearms. Alright, classic. Weapon properties. Light. When you take the attack action on your turn and attack with a light weapon, you can make one extra attack as a bonus action later on the same turn. That extra attack must be made with a different light weapon, and you don't add your ability modifier to the extra attack's damage unless that modifier is negative. Fascinating. I thought they had changed this. No, maybe they just changed the fighting style, but keep this in mind for later. I thought they had changed how two-weapon fighting works, but perhaps it was specifically the two-weapon fighting style. And says, which just leaves it with when you hit with a ranged attack using a thrown weapon, you gain a +2 bonus to the damage roll. Yeah, we'll see if they maintained any of that. I'm now very curious. Thrown. Mastery properties. Yes, so thrown, if a weapon has a thrown property, you can throw the weapon to make a ranged attack, and you can draw that weapon as part of the attack. If the weapon is a melee weapon, you use the same ability modifier for that attack roll and damage roll that you would use for a melee attack with that weapon. If you throw a hand axe, you use your strength, but if you throw a dagger, you could use either your strength or your dexterity, since the dagger has the finesse property. Interesting bit of probably needless clarification, but maybe not. Maybe it wasn't needless. So the juice. Mastery properties. This is the part of the stream that is my review. When my editor clips this later, this is probably going to be the start of a clip. So, each weapon now has a mastery property, as shown in the weapon tables above. That property is usable only by a character who has a feature such as weapon mastery, that unlocks the property for that character. Okay, we're going to start off here. Already bad. Already sucks. When you get to martial combat in 5th edition, I was having this discussion last night. The thing that people... How do I phrase this? I was trying to explain to somebody that even if I could prove to them that martial characters were in fact just as effective in terms of damage, in terms of effect on the battlefield, through additional indirect means, like the fact that martials make you make your casters more effective, because you need martials in order to funnel people in the ideal spellcasting range, and protect your back line, of course, from getting thug-womped instantly in the combat. Even if I could prove all of that beyond a shadow of a doubt, they would still probably not like martial characters in 5th edition. And what that means to me is that if you don't like martial characters in 5th edition, there's some reason that you don't like it that has probably nothing to do with damage output or with damage whatever. Impacting combat. It probably has to do something with how the class plays. I explained back in 1st edition, playing a 1st level fighter meant that you got to command troops, and that was pretty cool. The ability to command troops is pretty handy. You have this little force multiplier. You could spread your seed or influence all over the battle map in a way that's missing from modern editions. So this had already been fixed back in the old days, and they fixed it a second time in 4th edition, where everybody had, no matter what your class, you had interesting things to do on your turn. Pretty fun. And 5th edition got rid of that. 5th edition, if you wanted to use the cool martial maneuvers that were present in 4th edition, they were restricted. They were restricted to a single subclass of the fighter called the Battlemaster. The only fighter worth playing, frankly. At least in the player's handbook. I understand others have come out since. You. I don't know, man. The idea that they would come back and they say, look, we invented this new system so that weapon users could finally be. Yes, they did add the Battlemaster maneuvers to feet in Tasha's. We added these new weapon maneuvers that have been gone for basically a full edition, for completely inaccessible to the vast majority of characters. Finally, if you use a weapon, you can do something cool with it. But you need a feat. You need a feat, or you need a subclass, or you need a specific character class. You're going to be dipping into fighter if you really want it. So, I don't really see the point of that. This to me is something that should be open to everybody, because martial combat is not fun in 5th edition, and so this thing, which is made to make it more fun, should be available to everyone. And if you want to make it additionally interesting, if you want to raise the baseline such that other people are going to have fun with this, even more fun with it, you add like a second mechanic on top of that, like having 2 masteries on a given weapon. Let's see here. Most of the people I've played 5e with are 3e people, and they avoid martials like the plague. It's kind of sad. Well, they're not fun to play. Okay, so here are the descriptions of each mastery property. The properties are provided in alphabetical order. If a game feature lets you replace a weapon's mastery property with another one, that weapon must meet any prerequisite specified for the new property. Interesting. So this is what weapon mastery a feature which lets you do weapon mastery should look like. This last paragraph here, it should not be this extra restrictions. First up is Cleave. If you hit a creature with a melee attack using this weapon, you can make an attack roll with the weapon against a second creature within 5 feet of the first that is also within your reach. On a hit, the second creature takes the weapon's damage, but don't add your ability modifier to that damage unless the modifier is negative. You can make this extra attack only once per turn. Okay, so we're going to start off here. This is clearly 2 notes. First, clearly taking a bite out of Great Weapon Master, which they completely annihilated in 5th edition for reasons unknown to literally anybody, including very much the designers. But my second note here is that this is a lot to do less. I dislike mechanics which provide me more restrictions than they do text about the specific mechanic. If you hit a creature with a melee attack using this weapon, you can make another attack roll. That's bad. It should just be the same attack roll and the same damage. It's Cleave. The idea is that you're swiping through. Hello, Dragon Pulp. Nice to see you. The objective here should be to save time in 5th edition combat, because it is famously slow for no apparent reason. So if you're letting people make additional attacks, especially at the early levels, you should be looking to speed up this process and not slow it down. This leads into my second critique, or second item of note that is in need of critique. On a hit, the second creature takes the weapon's damage, but don't add your ability modifier to that damage unless that modifier is negative. There's no real... It would be so much easier to design to accommodate just same attack roll, same damage on the monster side of the equation. right? It would be easier to do this to accommodate whatever increase in power we scaled this at on the other side of the DM screen. But instead, we have decided to add a whole bunch of text that a bunch of dumb people are going to be, because 1D&D is made for people who are not used to RPGs or are not used to the mechanics of RPGs. And so they're going to be confused. They're like, well, do I add it to this one? Or no, I actually, here, please take that off. I accidentally added the wrong thing. Can you go back and fix these hit points and just makes combat messier for what exactly? How much damage is that making the difference between? Do marshals really need to not have the, how important is it for marshals to not have that extra 3 damage? Great question. Brando said, are they really that afraid of just giving marshals a second melee roll? In 5th edition they weren't, because this actually also cannibalized another feature that sadly didn't make it into the 1D&D Ranger, which was my favorite feature of the Hunter, was at 3rd level, you could choose between 3 features. You got Giant Slayer, Colossus Slayer, which was an extra 1d8 damage on creatures who had taken damage. There was a reaction for when creatures, Giant Killer, I think, which was when somebody attacked you. If they were larger than you, you could attack them back with a reaction. That was pretty cool. And my favorite, Horde Breaker, or Breaker, rather, where if you attack somebody, you could just make a free extra attack against somebody else within 5 feet of them. It was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed it. It really helped shore up my initial damage values when I first played that character. And then when I played that character again later, it kind of respect them. And still went with Hordebreaker. God, it was just so much fun. 6 of Swords says, why didn't they just copy the cleave power from 4th edition fighter? It involves no extra rolls because they're stupid. Jeremy Crawford's an idiot. Thunderchild, hey Caleb, nice to see you, buddy. 5th edition is notorious for excluding mechanics due to too many dice rolls. Now it is encouraging more rolling. Great weapon, fighting would like to have a word. Yes, very fun. Randos22 says, Hordebreaker sounds basically like how Axe Cleave works, if I recall. I am not familiar enough with Axe, but of course, Axe already does that. Somebody post a GIF. Let's see. Flex. This is a versatile property, prerequisite. I forgot to note these. Yeah, melee weapon, heavy property. Flex, prerequisite versatile property. When you hit with a melee attack using this weapon, you deal its versatile damage, even if you're wielding it with one hand. This is fascinating to me. First things first. This gets my unambiguous endorsement. Have an extra 2 damage. It's usually an extra 2 damage. Is it ever not an extra 2 damage? Let's see here. Finesse, light, thrown, versatile. Yeah, so 1d8 piercing, versatile is 1d10. 1d8 piercing, versatile 1d10. 1d8 bludgeoning, versatile 1d10. 1d8 slashing, versatile 1d10. 1d8 slashing, versatile 1d10. 1d6 bludgeoning, versatile 1d8. Yes, so it is always an extra 2 damage. This reminds me of the Monkey Grip feat from 3rd edition, which let you wield a 2-handed weapon, like a great weapon in one hand, so you could have a shield on the other, and this is like a little less nonsensical as far as that goes. It's versatile damage even if you're wielding with one hand. That frees up a slot for a shield, basically. Hey, have a +2 damage bonus. Fantastic. This is the kind of design. It's something this kind of design is something I'm a little less interested in now when I'm making my own games. But as far as 5th edition goes, as far as 1D&D goes, this is good. Raise, prerequisite melee weapon, heavy property, another heavy property. If your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature, you could deal damage to that creature. equal to the ability modifier you use to make the attack roll. This damage is the same type dealt by the weapon, and the damage can't be increased in any way other than increasing the ability modifier. Okay, this is bad. Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to start off here by we're going to make a Google Doc. Blank. You've been selected. Oh, cool. Exit out. Dismiss. Not interested. Okay, so what is this? We have graze. If your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature. Oh, that did not do anything correctly. All right. So, what we're going to do now is redesign this. Graze, prerequisite melee weapon, heavy property. If your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature, what happens is, if you miss somebody, you could deal somewhere between 3 to 5 damage. I don't know why you would deal 3 to 5 damage. That it's almost never going beyond 3 to 5. It might potentially make it to 6. It can't be increased in any way, which is a little bit annoying, so we're going to just change this. When you miss an attack with a... How do they do it for their weapon? Because they changed the language. With this, if your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature... do I want to make sure... Yeah, so they did change this language. Equal to the... And we're gonna make this much simpler, and we're gonna make it something that can scale. Yeah, there we go. If your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature, you can deal damage to that creature equal to... Chat, what am I going to say here? Okay? So I'm going to give you a few hints here. I don't like mechanics. Oh, I think I'm... There we go. I think I'm back. Chat. All right, chat. What am I going to say here? Am I cutting in and out for you guys? All right, if I sound fine to you, then it's just the... Okay. I know what's going wrong there. It's probably my laptop. Yes, okay, so I don't like mechanics. Red Squirtle, you're very close. I don't like mechanics that change the... I don't like... If they just deal a flat bonus, that is a tiny number. It's a tiny number. I hate it. Why are you going to stop combat so that somebody... there was a hair in my mouth. Why are you going to stop combat so that somebody can write down 3 damage? It's almost never worth it. It's a pain as time goes on. You have no reason not to do it because you get it for free, but it keeps slowing down the combat. And I especially hated this with the Storm Sorcerer. I think it was the Storm Sorcerer in 5th edition. Matt played this character. My buddy Matt, who was my first DM, played this character who would be able to, I think once he got to 6th level, he would be able to deal damage equal to half his sorcerer level within a certain radius to everybody around him if he cast a spell. And this was like useless because how much does 3 damage matter in a combat to like 5 different creatures? If he's all around them, it's like, all right, cool. Well, technically that's 15 damage, but it's spread out across all these other guys. And I gotta look down, I gotta check, I gotta look. It's a waste of time. So 6 of Swords got it, indirectly. Damage plus proficiency bonus, or damage equals proficiency bonus plus attribute bonus. Close. Very, very close. If your attack roll with this weapon misses a creature, you can deal damage to that creature equal to your attack bonus. So if you have a +1 weapon, or you have a +2 weapon, or +3 weapon, or if you have something that gives you extra, if you have something that gives you extra damage, or sorry, extra bonuses to hit from a fighting style, which is actually quite common. You just literally, instead of looking at your damage, you look one box over where it says your attack bonus, which is probably +6, +9, whatever. And this is something that scales up much higher and scales in a fashion. By the time you get to something like 6th level, you're probably going to have something like a, based on bonuses to hit and stuff like that, you're probably going to have something like a +9 to hit. It's not out of the question, at the very least, to have something like a +9 to hit. Maybe it's like more like a +6, but by that point, that number is 1 flat, and the other number is also technically flat. 2, right in the same area where you're looking for your character sheet, where you literally just look over like a centimeter, and you'll see this particular damage value, and it scales throughout the entirety of the game. It can scale on account of magic items. It can scale on account of character options. It will scale based off your proficiency bonus. There's no avoiding that one. And it can scale based off increasing your attribute used for the roll. And what this allows it to do is scale higher so that the damage is not a waste of time, so you don't feel bad for using it, but compelled to use it anyway because it's free. It's of a value that is significant across the course of the combat. And like I said, this is extra damage. If the 3 extra damage or whatever is a matter of great import to the designers, fix that. On the other side of the GM screen, do not have a ridiculous amount of extra text to explain what should be a relatively simple ability. So what is that? That's great. Grind. All right, does that track to everybody? Nick. Prerequisite is the light property. Hey, okay. All right. Interesting. Let's see here. When you make the extra attack of the light property, you can make it as part of the attack action instead of as a bonus action. You could still make this extra attack only once per turn. This is interesting to me. I don't have... Two-weapon fighting has always been finicky. This is really going to depend on the two-weapon fighting style. If the two-weapon fighting style is good, this is going to be exceptionally good. Is there, real quick, are there any other... or Vex. Okay. Alright, so there is one other property that deals with the light weapons. So that's good. Reno says, I feel like WotC keeps forgetting that human beings have to keep track of these numbers, and humans only have so much mental bandwidth. Well, the problem there is that Jeremy Crawford only has so much mental bandwidth, and as such, this slips his mind on occasion. Push. Prerequisite is heavy, two-handed, or versatile. Heavy and two-handed are getting a lot of work out of this. Push says if you hit a creature with this weapon, you can push the creature up to 10 feet away from you if it is no more than one size larger than you. Oh my goodness. Full endorsement. Okay. So, first up, a lot of features which have a size restriction, something like you can't knock this creature prone unless if they're... You can only knock this creature prone if they're of a certain size or smaller. You can only push this creature if they're only a certain size and smaller. Do not take into account the size of the player character. So if you have a large player character, which is possible, you could get that through spells, you could get that through magic items. If you have somebody who, for whatever reason, has suddenly become large, their size limit on tripping or shoving or whatever, doing whatever to people, does not actually increase. And this is pretty annoying. This is pretty terrible. So they've fixed that. Here, if you hit a creature with this weapon, you can push the creature up to 10 feet away from you if it is no more than one size larger than you. So if you're size small, if you're size medium, if you're size large, if you're size huge, if you're size tiny, it's always just one size larger than you. So this is cool, and it's bringing back a little bit of 4th edition, but as mentioned, this is going to really heavily depend. My endorsement of features like this is going to depend on whether or not classes like the expert classes actually get access to this. If Rangers don't get access to weapon masteries because they've decided that none of the expert classes gain access to weapon masteries because that's just going to be part of the fighter class or the martial class or whatever they're called, then this actually sucks a lot. This is something that's then missing from the Ranger that I now have to languish and yet another Ranger that's been poorly designed. I don't want to do that. Sap. No prerequisite is no other properties. If you hit a creature with this weapon, that creature is disadvantaged on its next attack roll before the start of your next turn. What has that property? I wonder. That's slow. How many of you have sap? There's 1, 2, Flail, and Morningstar. Flail and Morningstar have sap. That's interesting to me. Getting smacked by these. Huh. So getting smacked by a Flail or a Morningstar just really knocks the piss out of you. The sad thing is based on the earlier description, there is no way to apply this property to any other weapon besides those two. And I feel like there are other weapons that might be pretty good candidates for it, other than the fact that they have additional properties. So I don't know what to do there. But maybe you would see WotC never does anything like this, but it would be fascinating if some of the magic items that were made available suddenly had some of these extra properties. Like you got a trident with slow, or you got a trident with sap, or you got a pike or a lance that had sap on it. That'd be pretty interesting. Shoot. Okay. Hold on a second. If they hadn't taken the lance, and decreased its damage for absolutely no reason whatsoever, made it heavy, again, for absolutely no reason whatsoever, reach is fine, two-handed unless mounted. Okay, so that's how they fixed the lance. If they just made this the special property instead and included an exception for special when it came to the sap thing, they could have attached this to the lance and made lances really interesting. It's not kind of I feel like they missed an opportunity here. Polearm Master Sentinel with sap. That would be so nice. They got rid of that combination because WotC is very opposed to a kind of structure in play, or a kind of structure in character customization, which is, okay, so normally you do a thing. If you have class features say, well, when you do a thing, this other thing procs. That's how they make the game more interesting. Sentinel and Polearm Master, those two feats, were an example of a combination that produced a structure that's really not seen in 5th edition, which is action proc, where you do a thing that procs Produce random occurrence, or the other thing, or procedure, depending on where you learned, depending on whether or not you heard this from Warframe or World of Warcrafters, uh, based off that class feature. And then a second thing happened, which leads off the secondary effect. That's not common in 5th edition. 5th edition is very anti that design. The problem, of course, is that it's extremely fun. And so once combinations like that are discovered in 5th edition, everybody wants to try it. Because it's so cool to do a thing, have one of your class features, go off, more or less, and then have a second feature take effect as a result. So Polar Master, somebody's coming within 10 feet of me, I have a Polearm with me, I smack him, and then Sentinel activates, which says that person has no more movement left. Oh, this is so much fun! This is so entertaining! WotC doesn't like this sort of thing, so... Slow. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, that's interesting note there. We're going to come back to that. You can reduce its speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. If you hit the creature more than once with this property, the speed reduction doesn't exceed 10 feet. Fix the bug where people were enjoying themselves. Jeez. Okay. Yeah. Fix the bug where people were enjoying themselves. If you hit the creature more than once with this property, the speed reduction doesn't exceed 10 feet. Okay, so I think the reason they said this... No, I can't even justify that. Okay, so clearly, you could only reduce it by 10 feet. And then they added a second line here that said, by the way, it doesn't go past 10 feet. If they had not added this second line here, would that have changed anything? Slow. Prerequisite none. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you can reduce its speed by 10 feet until the start of your next turn. I almost wish they would write some of these as code or something. Maybe. Well, if I just said, you can't... If I just said, the creature can only suffer this detriment once per turn, I feel like that's easier. They're plain English versions of what they mean mechanically is so clunky. Yeah. Well, clearly they ran into the same problem I did. Topple. We're nearly through these. If you had a creature with this weapon, this is, by the way, for the heavy reach or versatile... I forgot something. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, this suggests to me that we're going to see more creatures. Maybe it's a complete red herring, because maybe they would just forget that they wrote something like this. It wouldn't be the first time. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, suggests to me that some creatures are going to have damage reductions that occasionally result in them not taking any damage, which would be cool. And I would endorse, but I'm only inferring that from this mechanic. Topple. If you hit a creature with this weapon, you can force the creature to make a... Oh, knock him prone. Okay, cool. The creature has the prone condition. Why wouldn't you just say you knock the creature prone? How stupid do you have to be? If you hit a creature with this weapon, you can force a creature to make a Constitution saving throw with a DC equal to 8, plus your proficiency bonus, plus the ability modifier you use to make the attack roll. This text should not exist here. There should be text up at the top that says Martial Save DC. And Martial Save DC, or even, now that they have an official term for this, Mastery Save DC, should indicate what the saving throw is going to be for this. Ditto for the push, ditto for the shove, stuff like that. So that they could expand on this later and not have to include the exact same text every single time. On a failed save, the creature has the prone condition. Why would you write it this way? On a failed save, you knock the creature prone. You knock the creature prone. What that says is, when you use natural language like this, on a failed save, the creature has the prone condition. That's not natural language. If I say, on a failed save, you knock the creature prone, you infer, you know, that if the creature is prone, then you could just look at the prone condition. This is like overly technical. The creature has the prone condition. It's a very strange way of writing and a rather pointless change that I don't think adds anything to the game. Vex is the final one, ammunition, finesse, or light property. If you hit a creature with this weapon and deal damage to the creature, you have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. There's that note about dealing damage to the creature again. My accomplisher says, I like how Vex reads. I also like this. You have advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. So if you... What's really, really funny is you have the ammunition property here, right? Okay. You have the ammunition property. Folks, what did we lose in 1D&D that has to do with ammunition? Can somebody tell me? Was there something that changed about ammunition or ranged builds in the transition from 5th edition to 1D&D? Can anyone read my mind? I know I'm asking for a leading question here. Let's go, chat. Come on. Up, 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 up. What do we got here? Something changed between 5th edition and 1D&D when it came to ranged builds. That's going to come up here. What do you guys think that is? I'll give you a hint. It was a feat. Smite. No, believe it or not. Multi-attack, also no. I forgot the delay on this thing is actually quite extensive. So yes, it is a feat. Alright, we spend enough time on it. It is Sharpshooter. The Sharpshooter feat no longer provides you with a damage bonus and no longer works off the risk-reward function of taking my -5 penalty to hit, get +10 damage to your damage roll should you succeed in hitting. And yeah, so this would work really well with 5th edition's Sharpshooter. This would be a godsend. Or he is in range. Is he within 600 feet, Caleb? Then he is within range. Okay. Advantage on your next attack roll against that creature before the end of your next turn. The interesting thing to me is that I think you could just keep proccing this over and over and over again. So ignores, yeah, but the cover wasn't the thing that we were interested in. It was in dealing more damage. Because that was the thing that came up most often, was martial characters, depending on the campaign, or the vices and events and DM dependent mechanics of the campaign could make life for marshals very difficult. So having something like Sharpshooter, having something like Great Weapon Master to boost your damage by default was a nice cushion, or could provide a cushioning effect for somebody who wasn't having a great time as a marshal in 5th edition. Let's see here. Thunderchild says, and I can verify this, I played a sharpshooter ranger for 2 years, ignored cover maybe 5 times, did like 1,000 extra damage with sharpshooter. That's accurate. I I would dare say that's probably more. It's probably more than 1,000. Might be more like 2,000. Six of Swords says Vex's next attack roll. It doesn't say that the attack has to be with the same weapon or even a weapon at all. Correct. Interesting. Adventuring gear. All right, so that's the weapon masteries, folks. My overall opinion is that they're pretty cool. I wish they were in base 5th edition. I'm not happy that they're getting added with this edition because we're not getting. I was thinking of spell attacks after using Vex. Can you do that? Yes, you can. Okay. Unless the magic action has defined itself as not being like when you take the magic action, it's not actually an attack roll, it's something else, then I would say yes. So my overall opinion of these weapon masteries are that they have been okay. We're gonna list these out. First issue: weapon masteries have not been organized properly. There should be something like a mastery DC that makes it so that when I write this down on my character sheet, I do not have to repeat the same exact line over and over and over again. I could just have one thing that says mastery DC, strength DC 15, dexterity DC 17. It should just be right there. And given that I almost always make the attacks, and I don't think that 5th edition has any extra features as of yet that let you make attacks with constitution, intelligence, charisma, or wisdom with weapons, using any of those statistics with weapons, it seems reasonable to me that you could just reserve a space on the character sheet and in the organizational text to just say mastery DC equals this. Fantastic. Now, when you write things down, you could just say, if somebody fails to save against my mastery DC, they get knocked prone, or they get pushed 10 feet. Fantastic. When we look at some of the features that were provided that are meant to shore up damage in the event of a miss, which I broadly speaking like, it gives marshals a further edge in maximizing the value of their turn, and even when they miss, or even when they're splitting damage. I generally like mechanics like these. They have been nerfed sort of internally for no obvious reason. And I don't care if it quote unquote makes sense with that. I'm not arguing from like, oh well, this doesn't make sense with the narrative. No, like I don't know why you would avoid clearer damage values that you would want to take advantage of that do scale as levels go on, that aren't tedious to write down, because presumably, I would imagine that at the very least WotC would say that they want people to play this past 7th level. Unlike their current game. So weapon masteries get a C+. There are some interesting ideas in here that were already executed upon better in previous editions and across the entirety of their third-party support base. So as to why they did those things worse than what's been done before is really anyone's guess. When you take the attack action on your turn, well, let's go to Adventuring Gear. There's only like 2 entries here. Only one of which matters. We're just going to go over the net. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can replace one of your attacks with a throw of the net at a creature within 15 feet of you. That's good, so they remove the range increment. The target must succeed on a dexterity saving throw against a DC equal to 8 plus your proficiency bonus plus your dexterity modifier. Imagine if you had that mastery DC. You could say dexterity mastery DC. Perfect. The target succeeds automatically if it's huge or larger. This disappoints me for reasons I'll explain later, because there's other things in here. Let's see here. On a failed save, the target has a restrained condition until it escapes the net. To escape, the target must use its action to make a DC 10 Strength Athletics check, escaping on a success. A creature within 5 feet of the target can use its action to attempt the same thing. Destroying the net, AC 10, 5 HP, immunity to bludgeoning, poison, and psychic damage. Also frees the target, ending the effect. Okay. The Gelatinous special indeed. Alrighty. So, screw it. Do we want to... So, first things first, when I look at this net, I think this would be better designed if people had just written it as a... People had just written it as a stat block. And here's a really interesting thing that you could do with items, is you could say, vials have 1 HP, you could say nets have 5 HP, something, something, something. What if we just had, what if certain items, like adventuring kits and stuff like that, just had, alright, this has 10 HP. And then we specified in the organizational text, we would say, we're going to say in adventuring gear, items included within are immune to poison and psychic. Unless stated otherwise. And then when I put 10 HP down here, I could say immune to bludgeoning. It's just a short little note. Or I could say 5 HP, but I'm not going to do 5 HP because that's dumb. We're doing 10 HP. When you take the attack action on your turn, you can replace one of your attacks with a throw of the net. With a throw of the net within 15 feet. Okay. You take the attack action on your turn. That's pointless. Okay. I forgot how stupid these people are and how they insist on capitalizing everything. The attack action. In place, you may throw the net in place. So when you take the attack action, you may throw the net in place of a weapon. Of an attack. Take it. The attack action may throw the net. Place of an attack. Target within 15 feet. This is kind of the annoying thing about the fact that they removed the weapon classification from this, because they had a fun ranged increment that I didn't need to include if it was just in the table. So, that's annoying. And take the attack action. You may throw the net in place of an attack at a target within 15 feet. Targeting a creature within 15 feet. The target must succeed on a dexterity saving throw against your dexterity mastery DC. Whoops, that was unintentional. Target succeeds automatically if it's huge or larger. Chad, how do we feel about this? How do we feel about the size restriction? Because what I'm feeling is that it's understandable for a small net to not restrain somebody if they're huge or larger. That's fine. But I kind of want a section for nets. Some of which are bigger, some of which are smaller, some of which are actually snares. I feel like the net section in the player's handbook should be a section of things that you can use to restrain people non-lethally. On a failed save, the target has a restraint condition until it escapes. To escape... That's interesting. Why did they keep a DC 10 athletics? Why did they keep that? To escape, the target must use this action to make a DC 10 strength athletics check, escaping on a success. Reach within 5 feet. The target... So we're going to rewrite this. The target, or a creature within 5 feet of it must use this action to make a DC 10 strength athletics check, escaping on a success. What about acrobatics for escape? No, I don't think so. So the target succeeds automatically if it's huge or larger. We're going to say the target succeeds automatically if larger than the net's maximum size. Maximum size or smaller than its minimum size. But maybe I changed that. The target succeeds automatically if it falls outside the net's minimum or maximum size. And what this says is there are bigger and smaller nets. There are nets for catching pixies and jellyfish. There are nets for catching dragons, and they, broadly speaking, use the same mechanics, but they do not. But they can be purchased separately. They have separate entries within the books or within the player's handbook and adventuring gear. I like this. Damage types. Some items are immune to additional damage types. Imagine if I put like a small note here about items. Destroying worn and carried items. When a creature net size should matter. All right. When a creature takes damage, this is just a note for future things. I was wondering about, given that I gave this item HP, and we said Adventuring Gear is by default going to have HP. When a creature takes damage, would exceed an item's hit points a piece of Adventuring Gear's hit points result piece of Adventuring Gear's hit points the creature chooses one item to be destroyed. That's probably fair. Damage from an attack can't provoke. Can't produce this effect unless the creature was carrying the item in their hand. Which actually sounds pretty cool to me. So if you're carrying a torch, or if you're carrying a torch, or if you're carrying a net in hand, or if you have like a flask of oil and somebody hits you with damage from an attack, I think it's reasonable for like that thing to fucking just shatter instantly. I think that would be pretty cool. But otherwise, so one thing I might do in a system like this is I might take net. I might say, okay, 10 HP. A lot of these items have pretty low HP values, but I might take something like, for instance, so I might take a priest pack, and I might say that that actually has 60 HP, right? I might say something huge. I might say, well, I probably wouldn't do 60 HP, but I might do something that puts it out of range for fireballs. So I might say something like, let's say 40 HP. You're probably not taking over 40 damage from fireball, broadly speaking. So anything that's inside the priest pack is going to be safe. Troll tries to smash a torch. Hey, that'd be pretty fun. Torches is another thing that came up to me in mind. I kind of wish that torches either had an entry in a section like this, or had their own entry in the weapons section. It's increasingly clear that's definitely not going to happen here, but whatever. Okay, you folks ready to go to? Let's actually. I'm gonna grab a quick drink of water. While I'm gone, I have a decision for you folks to be made. Do you want to move on to spells? Because I only have a few comments about it. Next, or do you want to move on to one of the classes? Because these are the last two items on our list. And then we might do a little bit of Twitter drama. Or cake farming, as it were. Yeah. Alright, so type your answer in the chat. I'll be back in about 30 seconds. Alright, so we got some split votes in here. Rano says, are the spells interesting? The spells themselves, actually, you know what? There are 3 spells that are interesting. Welcome back, everybody. Spells are cool, I think. Spells, spells, spells. Want to see classes, I do find them more interesting. Alright, people said spells. So, updates to the arcane list. 2 bard spells have been removed from the list: Vicious Mockery and Dissonant Whispers. Now, future Unearthed Arcana, those spells will still be available to the bard. I point this out because they are looping themselves back into just including class lists for spells. Like, oh wait, no, probably warlocks and artificers and wizards don't really need Vicious Mockery and Dissonant Whispers, so we're gonna make those exclusive to the bard. You could have just given them their own list and updated certain things. Like, I feel like so much of this is like a tool use issue, and people like Jeremy Crawford, being, of course, a lower form of primate, have not quite gotten around to tool use, so this would have to be provided for them by somebody at the company. But I feel like the issues that they're trying to avoid could be solved by having a kind of Excel spreadsheet that gave you that when you wanted to add a spell to the game, could be classified such that you would be able to classify for, okay, I want this kind of class to have it. And then sometimes you would say, no, I only want 1 or 2 classes to have this. And it would have a little drop-down menu so that you would be confident that while there was a general arcane spell list behind the screen, behind the scenes of the game, behind the walls of the design, that's not what was exposed to people. People understood that while there was quite a bit of overlap between artificers, bards, warlocks, and wizards, and sorcerers, that... Wait, you guys have opposable thumbs? That they were still curated class lists, and so would avoid problems like somebody wondering why bard staples were available to everyone, or why bard spells were no longer in the spell list and were instead added to a small footnote around the class, which is going to make it, it's going to require them in the future to make these additional curated spells, these curated select spells, instead of having a bunch of different lists, which have a ton of overlap, they're now going to have one list that everybody shares, but a few curated exceptions that also make it on these spell lists of individual classes that will have to be more heavily curated, that will have to be more heavily that will have people have to keep a closer eye on, because otherwise, like, they're going to say things like, well, we can't add these 2 bard spells because to our footnote on the extra spells that bards get, because we don't have 2 extra bard spells for sorcerers, warlocks, artificers, and wizards. So this is something of a future-proofing issue that WotC is literally, we're watching them devolve. We're watching them regress in real time and cause additional problems for themselves. Because 5th edition was already not future-proof. It's just amazing to me that these people have no conception of problems that they might have in the future and ways to get around it. They're doing the opposite. This is clearly made with an issue that they've had in the past in mind, that they're now trying to solve for retroactively, not understanding that they're going to face the same issue probably in the near future. Unless they're planning on just never updating any of these spell lists or giving any of these classes new spells, which, it's WotC. How many new spells did they really come out with? in the 8 years that 5th edition was active. Barely 100. If they devolve enough, maybe they'll return to better editions. Now, if they devolve enough, they're going to return to BX, is the problem. So BX was like when AD&D and Basic Expert were released at the same time. What people didn't realize was this was kind of like the horseshoe theory of RPGs. And on one hand was complete games that simply by playing them, or simply through the process of playing these games, would generate an implied setting and generate a world and generate like a play space. It was a self perpetuating engine for play. And then on the other hand, you had BX, which was a role playing activity that was fun to experiment with. And that what people didn't realize is that these would. Oh, hello. There's a cat beneath me. Hi. That was distracting. I'm not going to finish that joke. There are some people I like who play Basic Expert. So, we're going to get to the spells. We have some design notes here. Oh, fascinating. Cool, cool, cool. So, design notes, spell updates. Here are the main updates in this section. New spells. 11 new spells appear here, with each one connected to a sorcerer, warlock, or wizard feature. No. Well, they already mentioned the bard ones. They already mentioned the bard ones, which are Vicious Mockery. And Vicious Mockery and, what was it? Dissonant Whispers. Nothing for the Artificer here. I remain impressed. Pathfinder 2nd Edition is eating good with its spell selection. It's both potent, flavorful, and interesting. I'm happy to hear that, because I'm probably going to play it within the next year. I am going to play within the next year. I'm going to start running a paid game on Start Playing Games. I might run it twice per week. We'll see what happens. But I'm going to start running either it's going to be Ghosts of Saltmarsh, or it's going to be Call of the Netherdeep. Like the cantrip Inside Ropes. Oh my god. So Otterstar on my server, which is linked in the description, by the way. My server, which is linked alongside my Patreon, patreon.com/RubeJelly. Otter introduced me to that spell, and it was horrifying the first time I found it. Is Pathfinder 2nd Edition basically just modified 3rd Edition still? No, it's modified 4th Edition. And modified in a really clever fashion. There was a lot of the same names of 3rd Edition content, but fundamentally, I think of it as being modified 4th Edition. Presented with a lot of natural language, still takes the same class design. It's its own beast, but does have some inspiration from 4th Edition. Yeah, we could probably agree there. When I see things that come out of 4th Edition, I tend to think of that as infecting the whole of a given game and its design philosophy. It tells me certain things about the designers that I usually like. So, and I get to wait. Chaos Bolt, the spell has moved over from Xanathar's Guide to Everything, and all sorcerers get it as a bonus spell. Woo, right, once again, we're looping back into curated list. Eldritch Blast. This cantrip now scales only with your warlock level, and all warlocks get it as a bonus spell. This is Jeopardy. This cantrip now only scales with your warlock level. Okay, so making it a class feature effectively, I think is perhaps, as far as 5th edition is concerned, actually a good idea. Because Eldritch Blast is one of the few spells, it's one of the only spells in the game, and it's a cantrip, which is important, that you get to modify in really substantial fashions, right? You get to modify adding your charisma bonus to this thing really early on in the game. And from these initial bonuses, you then get to enjoy how do I put this? From these initial bonuses, you can then dip out of the class and combine it with a whole bunch of other stuff, like Sorcerer and Quicken Spell, which is a lot of fun. But I think that it is a lot of fun. But practically speaking, when we look at, okay, do we want the high end of builds to all be Eldritch Blast modifications and different people, just different classes using a 2-level dip in Warlock to use to spam Eldritch Blast all the time? Is that what we want the game to be? I think it's fair for the designers to say no. It's understandable. Remember, they've been playtesting for 8 years. You have to. Some decisions are made slower than others. Renos22 said, might see some more variety with Warlocks with that change. No, I think so. I don't think you're going to see more variety with Warlocks. I think you're going to see more variety with multi-classing builds. And the way that Warlock dips interact with the game. Which is well, fine. But I think Warlocks, there's a good chance. I haven't seen them yet, but I would be curious to see what their approach to that problem was. I will not make any predictions as of yet. Arcane Eruption is their first spell. It's 4th level, Evocation. It's on the Sorcerer spell list, or it's attached to the Sorcerer spell list. Duration is instantaneous, range 120 feet. This is Bigger Fireball. Churning magical energy explodes in a 20-foot radius sphere centered on a point you choose within range. When you cast a spell, you select the type of damage dealt by the explosion. There's a bunch of lists. Each creature in the sphere must make a Constitution saving throw. On a failed save, the creature takes 66 damage of the chosen type. So far we have worse Fireball, but it's going to get a little bit better. On successful save, a creature takes half as much damage. Choose one of those d6s. The number rolled on that die determines a condition that's applied to each creature that failed the save, as shown below. The creature has the condition until the end of your next turn. So, this is actually pretty damn cool. This is a really cool design for a spell. So, d6 additional effect, incapacitated. That's the big one. Right? That's the one that's like ridiculously. You're not going to be happy. 2 is blinded, also not going to be happy. Frightened, disadvantage, can't move closer to the caster. All of your attacks within line of sight of the caster have disadvantage. Poisoned, disadvantage of all attack rolls and ability checks. Charmed, that's a big one. All right, it's a little bit interesting because I feel like the charmed people. Let's see here, and then deafened. They ran out of conditions. I would have gone with prone. Maybe I might have gone with prone. Deafened doesn't really do much, and that kind of sucks. But here's why I find the spell interesting. When you're determining the additional effect, you choose one of the d6s that's already been rolled. This is already way outside the bounds of what D&D typically lets you use as far as random effects go, right? So you take one of the d6s that you use for damage, and you rolled 6 of them, so feasibly you might have like an entry for everything on this list, and you get to choose what the additional effect is. But here's the second. Yeah, you choose the die that you want to make use of. Here's the extra cool thing. If you roll a 1 on your damage dice, obviously that sucks. But if you have a 1 on just one of those damage dice, notice that the lower results here are more devastating to the enemy, and usually it's flipped. But I think the reason they flipped it here is because, or obviously the reason they flipped it here is because that makes you, that lower damage die can now be used to justify justify is a good word, a more devastating effect. And you get to choose. So if you roll a little bit lower on your damage, it actually means that you get to have a more devastating effect as far as the conditions are concerned, if you so choose. If just one of your dice rolls a 1, it's exciting. You could get all 6s except for a single 1 and be really happy about it. Because now you've basically maximized value by getting a slightly less damage. And that's really elegant design. And on top of that, at higher levels, all spells should have an at higher levels in 5th edition. There's no reason, there's no good reason that you can't have an at higher levels casting for all spells in 5th edition. If you're not creative enough to do it, you shouldn't be working on this game. It's trivially easy. When you cast a spell using a spell slot, 5th level or higher, the damage and no. The damage increases by 1d6 for each slot level above 4th. Okay, so they did keep the language that they use normally. What this means, of course, is that not only are you getting extra damage, you're getting extra opportunities to maybe get whatever your ideal result is here. So this is a lot of fun. This is good. This is something that you should steal for your games. I'm surprised it made it into this playtest. Book of Shadows is a new one. Stitching together strands of shadow, you conjure forth a book in your hand. The book contains eldritch magic that only you can access, granting you the following benefits. It gives you another 2 cantrips, which is interesting, and choose 2 first level spells that have the ritual tag. The spell... Wait a minute, what? What the hell? When the book appears, choose 2 cantrips and choose 2 first level spells that have the ritual tag. The spells can be from the Arcane, Divine, and Primal list. And they must be spells you don't already have prepared. Okay. Are there any other lists besides Arcane, Divine, and Primal? I guess there's the individual class lists that they've looped back into that they've now recreated for reasons unknown to anybody. Except me. While the book is on your person, you have the chosen spells prepared. Okay, cool. So you don't really have the... No, I guess you do have the slots for them, but really what you're going to be doing is ritual casting them. Spellcasting focus, you could use the book as a spellcasting focus. The book disappears if you cast a spell again or die. Okay, so if you cast a spell again, I assume that means you choose new cantrips. Cantrip upgrade. Interesting. When you reach 5th level as a warlock, the spell also enhances other cantrips while the book is on your person. You could add your warlock spellcasting ability modifier to the damage rolls of any cantrip you cast that doesn't already have that modifier added to its damage roll. It is not a ritual that gives you more spells. It is a cantrip that gives you more rituals. Which is curious. This design is weird. But frankly, just off there, I'm trying to keep any internal biases actually out, except for one, which is if something seems weird to me, especially in this game, I think you know what, go for it. Go for it. This is actually probably ideal. This is probably a good thing. So, Chaos Bolt works the same way as it does in 5th edition. If you're not aware, you throw a bolt of damage at people. You roll to determine what the damage is. And if you roll the same die twice, the bolt can hit another creature. And then it deals a little bit of extra damage, but no additional chance to hit somebody at levels. Now we come to the good stuff. We're going to bounce around a little bit more here because these next 3 are important. Next up, create spell. I'm just telling you the name of this because there's another spell called modify spell and then scribe spell that we're actually going to go look at first. So, memorize spell is you choose one spell from your spell book that you don't have prepared, and you choose another spell that you do have prepared. The unprepared spell replaces the prepared spell on your list of prepared spells. This replacement lasts until you cast Memorize Spell again or finish a long rest. This is only interesting to me. It is a ritual, which is good, but it's a divination spell, so you could cast it instantly. And that's a little bit interesting to me because the divination wizard's 6th level ability in 5th edition was that if you cast a divination spell, you would regain an expended spell slot that was 1 level lower. This was, in theory, pretty cool, but there were like 30 divination spells total, and you were likely to cast none of them. And they were all biased towards the higher levels of play, or almost all of them were biased towards the higher levels of play. And the ones that weren't were 1st level, so you weren't going to get any spell slots back from casting them. And as far as this, so this spell mostly, as far as I can tell, exists for another one. You can cast it as a ritual, which is kind of cool. And yes, modify spell. Okay, so we have back to the great spell thing, because I actually looked at the wrong one. Modify spell is what we're actually looking at, or that's actually important. This is a 4th level transmutation spell. Okay, that's justifiable. Using arcane formulas in your spell book, you magically alter one arcane spell you have prepared. You could change the spell's color, sound, and smell, and you make one of the following modifications to the spell. Components. Aw, you pieces of Okay, components. Remove one of the spell's components. Verbal, somatic, or material. You can't move the material component of a spell. Component, meaning this is worthless. If the spell requires concentration, damage can't break your concentration on the spell. Why? Why? Why do we... This is going to come up later, but we're now 8 years into the game, and we all understand... Those of us with a IQ above room temperature, at the very least, all understand that damage breaking concentration, damage ending a duration spell early, is a good thing. But keeping people from overlapping any duration effects is a bad thing. There's a very specific character fantasy that wizards in particular play to, the control caster, that relies on just the slightest overlap between two separate spell effects. And we've also found out over the years, of course, that keeping people from overlapping spell effects didn't actually diminish the wizard's effectiveness at all. In some cases, it actually made it more effective. Because it turns out, in the 3 rounds that it would take a wizard to engineer turning your boss into a pretzel through layered spell effects that if they failed all their saves, they just wouldn't be able to get out of it, and you could end the combat early without diminishing all of somebody's hit points, is that wizards instead just ended up using all the spells that reduce you to 0 hit points. So instead of doing, like, Bigby's Grasping Hand, Melkith's Grasping Hand, or Earthen Grip, Maximilian's Earthen Grasp, and then Bigby's Hand, and then Entangle, we'll say, I guess. What they did instead was they just cast Fireball 3 times. And turns out that ended the combats way faster, and always in the same way. So we found out that whole person, perfect. Thank you, Mike. So we found out that taking away that adding concentration to the game didn't really make wizards less effective at all. It just incentivized them to use the same damage spells over and over and over again, and it flattened the duration spells that they would use, because all of a sudden, all duration spells now had to be compared against one another. So there might be a case where I would like to use Wall of Sand. The problem is, casting Wall of Sand prevents me from casting Haste. And Haste is almost always better than Wall of Sand. And the trick is, even if you find a few use cases where Wall of Sand is better than Haste, Haste is useful so much more of the time that I'm probably never even going to prepare Wall of Sand. So it flattens gameplay. And the chief complaint about 3.5's combat, which is that wizards would walk in, they would cast the same exact, over and over and over again, cast the same exact buff spells, nerf spells in advance, divinations and such. They would do all the same things in advance, and it flattened gameplay was that they repeated the mistake, except wizards don't get to be as cool anymore. There's no difference between a control wizard and a blasting wizard in 5th edition, broadly speaking. Because they cast the same spells at the beginning of combat, and they cast the same spells in the middle of combat, and they cast the same spells at the end of combat. And they have no means of reducing it. So, concentration, if the spell requires concentration, what this should say, if you're not an idiot, if you're not the people who work at the good folks who work at Wizards of the Coast, what this should say is, if the spell requires concentration, casting another concentration spell doesn't break your concentration on this one. That's what this should say. But instead, the thing that's actually valuable about concentration, which is ending duration effects early through damage, like invisibility, you should be able to end invisibility early by hurting somebody. This says no. You can't cast invisibility. You can't have an effect, a duration effect on at the same time as invisibility, but we can keep somebody from ending invisibility early by hurting you. Why? Why is that a good thing? Do the opposite of what you're doing right now. Idiot. Damage type, you swap damage. Range. If a spell has a range of at least 5 feet and doesn't have a range of self, increase its range by a number of feet equal to 30 times your wizard level. That's pretty cool. If the spell lacks the ritual tag and has a casting time of at least 10 minutes, you can give it the ritual tag, but not sooner than that. That's okay. Targets. If the spell affects one or more targets and doesn't have a range of self, it now only affects your allies or enemies. Choose which when you cast modify spell. One or more creatures. Okay, so if you cast Fireball, you don't have to worry about it natively affecting your allies. Okay. The chosen alteration lasts until you cast Modify Spell again, or you finish your long rest. This altered version of the spell can't be added to a spellbook or spell scroll without first casting Create Spell. When you first cast a spell using a spell slot of 5th level or higher, you could choose an additional spell modification for each slot level above 4th. Cool. So here's something that's, okay, I'm going to look at chat first. Will the comparatively underpowered spell issues be fixed if wizards didn't acquire their new spells from the ether when they level, instead got them from loot? No. No, that wouldn't be fixed, because this is a general rule that governs how all spells are designed and cataloged in 5th edition. I've had this conversation with Aaron the Pedantic quite often, actually, is that the issue with Wizards, again, is the let's see here. The issue in 5th edition is the gameplay of Wizards and other control-focused casters basically being flattened. So this issue applies equally well to the Druid, if you're playing a Druid as like more spellcaster-oriented. It applies equally well to the Sorcerer. Sorry, no, it doesn't apply equally well to the Sorcerer, because the Sorcerer has so few duration spells to begin with, and they have such a tiny spell list to begin with, and a tiny number of spells known to begin with. So it doesn't matter as much. But you really notice it when you look at the 5th edition Cleric, has a lot of duration spells that for whatever reason just didn't have concentration applied to it. And it works fine. It works great. If you want to play a control-focused caster in 5th edition, you play a Cleric. Which is just insane to me. But so yeah, it sucks. Something that's interesting to me is the chosen alteration lasts until you cast Modify Spell again or finish a long rest. This altered version of the spell can't be added to a spellbook. So, the question that people are going to be asking is, if I add this to my spellbook, does the alteration become permanent? And if the alteration becomes permanent, and perhaps this is addressed in Create Spell, if the alteration becomes permanent, can I then cast this spell again? Concentration. They couldn't break for one. I hate these people so much. Oh, I hate these people so much. How can I make this hobby worse? How can I make it how can I make it more tedious for people? How can I flatten the number of experiences that you could have in this hobby such that the I can have a better experience playing a wizard in a video game than I can in a tabletop RPG. Tabletop RPG, which is supposed to be the height of all role playing and the height of all potential fantasies, the medium of tabletop RPGs is supposed to offer me so much more than any video game feasibly could, and just year by year by year, I I get less from this hobby than I can get in video games. Why? Why? Why would you ever design a game like that? Why would you choose to design a game like that? You're not making a video game. You're making something worse than a video game. And because I get less out of it than I get out of a video game, and it's slower than a video game, and it requires more work than a video game, and it costs quite a bit. The cost is pretty comparable. Actually, the cost of 3 core books is $50 a piece. So that's like 2.5 video games. I could play with other people. I get legitimate I get legitimately depressed when I look at stuff like this. Because I just think, oh, why? Why would you why are you like this? Okay. Arcane Focus. If you want to create a spell, it costs 1,000 gold pieces. Sorry, no, it costs 1,000 gold pieces per level. Emphasizing your arcane knowledge and power, you strive to create a new spell. To succeed, you must concentrate for 1 hour and meditate on the spell you just altered with Modify Spell. Otherwise, this spell fails. If you succeed, you must start casting Scribe Spell within the next 10 minutes and add the altered spell to your spellbook. Once the spell is in your spellbook, it becomes one of your known spells. It gains the wizard source rather than the arcane tag, and it gains a name of your choice. Okay, so I think you could repeat cast, modify spell, and then create spell. It just costs a lot of money, which is good. Except this, realistically speaking, should be a downtime activity. But WotC doesn't do that, so I guess, yeah, that's whatever. So let's go look at Scribe Spell as I get more depressed. First level transmutation spell. Channeling magic through quill and ink, you scribe an arcane spell in your spellbook or blank book worth at least 50 gold pieces. The scribed spell must be of a level for which you have spell slots, and the book must lack the spell. As you magically scribe the spell, you must copy it from another spellbook or spell scroll, or you must have it prepared. If you copy it from a spell scroll, the scroll is destroyed. If you have the spell prepared, the casting time and component costs are halved. When the scribing is complete, the spell becomes one of your known spells in the book, appearing on its own page. The spell appears in a cipher that's understandable only to you or somebody casting Identify or Scribe spell, and if the book was blank before scribing, that book is now your spell book. Okay, so they just turned the wizard method of inscribing spells into your spellbook into a spell. I don't know how I feel about that. Once again, these people are... Let's see here. Once again, these guys are flattening the experience of probably the majority of gameplay as far as wizards are concerned. I can think of one experience that this spell allows for that would not be permitted normally. which is that if you get a hold of somebody else's spell book, you could cast a spell, range, duration, instantaneous. You could cast this instantaneously and steal somebody's spell, which would be interesting. Or give, or practically speaking, give somebody else a spell. So if you research the spell, and create something, if you have another wizard in the party, you could have them cast Scribe spell, and then they can gain this. So that would be a new novel, but extremely niche experience that might come up once in a campaign, like in a weird moment. That's not part of like a dedicated gameplay loop that you could expect out of the game. Randos22 says it feels weird that these things are spells instead of class features. It's not out of the question, right? It's not out of the question to make these things spells. It's just that there was a way of doing it. Screw it. We're gonna stop looking at spells now. We're gonna go down to the wizard. And we're gonna see if this is what really does me in. We're gonna see if this is what just ruins my mind. Alright, wizard, class group, mage. Let's go through. You know what? Yeah, let's look through this. Okay, wizards are supreme magic users defined by their careful and exhaustive study of magic's inner workings. Drawing on the subtle weave of magic that permeates the cosmos, wizards cast spells of explosive fire, arcing lightning, subtle deception, and spectacular transformations. Their magic conjures monsters from other planes of existence, glimpses the future, or turns slain foes into zombies. Their mightiest spells change one substance into another, call meteors down from the sky, or open portals to other worlds. Beyond the sheer power of the spells they cast, though, wizards share an approach to magic that is scholarly and exacting. Wizards understand magic at a fundamental level, giving them precise mastery of their spells. They examine the theoretical underpinnings of magic, particularly the categorization of spells into schools of magic, and use those foundations to alter their spells and even craft entirely new spells. Renowned wizards such as Bigby, Tasha, Mordenkainen, Yolandi, and many more invented iconic spells now used across the multiverse. Wizards' lives are seldom mundane. The closest a wizard is likely to come to an ordinary life is working as a sage or lecturer in a library or university, teaching others the secrets of the multiverse. Other wizards sell their services as diviners, serve in military forces, or pursue lives of crime or domination. But the lure of knowledge and power calls to even the most unadventurous wizards out of the safety of their libraries and laboratories and into crumbling ruins and lost cities. Most wizards believe that their counterparts in ancient civilizations knew secrets of magic that have been lost to the ages, and discovering those secrets could unlock the path to a power greater than any magic available in the present age. So, design notes. Here are the main updates in this class, most of which were inspired by the Player's Handbook survey in 2021. Spellcasting now allows you to use your spell book as a spellcasting focus. Wizard Spellbook is a new first level feature which consolidates spellbook rules into one place. In addition, this feature gives you a wizard only spell, Scribe Spell. Let's see here. Academic is a new second level feature. Arcane Recovery is moved from first level to second level, pointless. Memorize Spell is a new fifth level feature. Modify Spell is a new seventh level feature. Create Spell is a new ninth level feature. Spell Mastery has moved from 18th level to 15th level. Signature Spells has moved from 20th level to 18th level. Epic Boon is a new 20th level feature that increases an ability score, raises that score's maximum to 30, and gives an Epic Boon feat. Training a wizard. They have not changed any of these. So moving on. Starting equipment. As a first level character, you start with the following equipment, or you could forgo it and spend 55 gold pieces on equipment of your choice. Multiclassing and the wizard. If your group uses the multiclassing, uses the multiclassing rules in the player's handbook, here's what you need to know. You must have a You must have a score of at least 13 in the wizard's primary ability, intelligence, to take a level in this class, or to take a level in another class if you are already a wizard. Interesting. So if you start as a wizard, you can be a wizard with a intelligence of lower than 13, but you're not allowed to multiclass into anything else, which is actually quite clever. That's actually quite clever, because I know what specific mechanical interaction they're defending against, which is occasionally you would start in a given class that, realistically speaking, you didn't meet any prime requisites for, but would decide to grow into. Right, you would choose it. You would choose fighter at first level, despite the fact that you didn't have a 13 in strength or 13 in dexterity. You would choose a fighter at first level so that you could get the heavy armor proficiency, and then you would multi-class into wizard, when really wizard was going to be your main shtick anyways. But you wouldn't have been able to start as a wizard and then multi-class into fighter. And they said, aha, well, you can't do that unless your stats are high enough. Spell slots. Let's see here. Add all of your wizard levels to the appropriate levels from other classes to determine your spell slots for casting spells, such as detailed in the multiclassing rules. You prepare spells for each of your classes individually, blah, blah, blah. Cool. Pretty standard. Level 1, spellcasting. Why not just have a minimum score to play it anyways? How do I ban this person? WotC has ordered me to ban you for mentioning something obvious that they should have done. Anyways, if they were worried about this. Yeah. So, first level spellcasting. As a student of arcane magic, you have learned to cast spells. See the player's handbook for the rules on spellcasting. The information below details how you use those rules as a wizard. Cantrips, 3 cantrips. Rather than choosing, you may start with Light, Mage Hand, and Ray of Frost. Whenever you gain a wizard level, you may replace one of your cantrips with another arcane cantrip of your choice. You gain another arcane cantrip at 4th and 10th level in this class, as shown in the cantrips column of the wizard table. What are we doing here for class features? Let's hear. So we got spellcasting, wizard spellbook, academic, arcane recovery, wizard subclass, feat, memorize spell, subclass feature, modify spell, feat, raid spell, subclass feature. They're replacing. Oh, God, you scumbag. Okay, so, noting that the wizard sucks as far as class features go, WotC decided, aha, we can cheat a little bit by replacing some of these gaps in class features with class feature that's 4 level gap. Why? God. We can replace some of these gaps in class features with spells. And even having done that, 12th level feat, 8th level feat, knowing that like the ability score improvements, broadly speaking, don't really count as class features, so they say feat here. Even having done that, they still end up with a bunch of gaps here. They just suck. They just suck so bad. So really, realistically speaking here, spellcasting wizard spellbook, that's not really a first level. It's kind of like a first level feature. Wizard spellbook is not a feature necessarily. It's just a way of preparing spells and getting a few extra. Academic, arcane recovery. Arcane recovery is a feature. I don't know what academic does. So let's go down and look. Spellbook, yeah. So this is all just how you prepare spells. Every class that has spells has details on how they prepare spells. It's not a class feature to prepare spells if you're already a spellcaster. Let's see here. Second level academic. Your time as a scholar has equipped you to recall a broad range of lore. When you take the study action, you have advantage on any intelligence check you make as part of that action. Cool. So you have advantage on a check. That's our second level feature. No unique events, no special events that you could proc. You just have advantage on a check. Which is, of course, the most interesting thing that you can do in all of D&D. And I'm so happy that after 8 years, this is the kind of quality design that we may expect from the good fine folks at Wizards of the Coast. Second level is Arcane Recovery. It looks to work exactly the same as it did prior. Cool. So once per day, when you take a short rest, you can look at your wizard levels, and you can look at your expended various spell slots. You can do a little calculation and say, aha, I would like to get some of those back based on this little calculation. You guys can read it yourselves. Okay. Okay. All right, buddy. Third level, Wizard subclass. You gain the Evoker subclass or another Wizard subclass of your choice. Okay, so they decided that their big showcase, Arcane Recovery, was in fact moved up a level. I understand why they did that. Is because it's just easier to say, if you're saying half your level, it's way easier to just move it up a level than to say add an extra line of text that says you get one, you round it up, I guess, at first level. When you first get the ability, it nets you one spell slot back. And then when you move to second level, it's really one spell slot back. And then once you get to fourth level, it's two spell slots back. Like you get the idea. I mean, not much of an effect on gameplay, probably. But they decided that the first wizard subclass they were going to show off was the guy that just blows stuff up. Which is fitting. Because they didn't do any of the other ones justice in any of the books that they ever released, so how would I expect anything otherwise? Fifth level, memorize spell. In your magical research, you have unlocked the secrets of memorize spell and add that spell to your spell book. You pieces of crap. Sixth level, subclass feature. Seventh level, modify spell. In your magical resource, you have unlocked the secrets of modify spell and add that spell to your spell book. Eighth level, feat. Ninth level, create spell. In your magical research, you have unlocked the secrets of create spell and add that spell to your spell book. That spell is cast immediately after modify spell and is followed by scribe spell. If you complete that trio of spells, you create a spell of your own. Cool. 10th level subclass feature. You gain a feature from your wizard subclass. 12th level feat. Oh. Yep, 11th level is a dead level. Cool. Your 14th level is a subclass feature. 15th level is spell mastery. You have achieved such mastery over certain spells you can cast them at will. It's really cool to me that they moved this down to 15th level. It means for the 3 people that play 15th level in 1D&D. And frankly, you guys are going to hate me for my review of this at the end, where I give my final stamp of my final rating. Spell mastery. You have achieved such mastery over certain spells that you can cast them at will. Yeah, so you can, and then you can swap these out after you choose them by spending 8 hours in study. Yeah. Cast those spells at the lowest level without expending a spell slot when you have them prepared. It's actually cool that you get this at 15th level. 16th level feat. 17th is a dead level again. 18th level signature spells. You gain mastery over 2 powerful spells and can cast them with little effort. This is where you choose 2 third level spells. You could cast each of them once without expending a spell slot. You could do this once per spell per short and long rest. Short or long rest. 19th level is a feat, 20th level is an epic boon. Okay, we're going to go through the wizard subclass, and then we're going to give my rating. See if you can guess what it's going to be. What do you think, chat? Just give me a quick tone check. What do you think my rating's going to be? Just class features that give you spells, but Rube, you get the next level of a spell at the dead level. That is a significant enough increase. Thank you, Dragon Bolt. All right, we have 4. We have 3 out of 10. Okay. Okay. Evoker. You focus your study on magic that creates powerful elemental effects, such as bitter cold, blah, blah, blah. You blast things. Evoker, formerly School of Evocation, has the new naming convention for wizard subclasses, which is to name the type of wizard rather than the type or school of magic. We did this because we're only including 4 subclasses in 1D&D for some reason for wizards. Evocation Savant now adds 2 evocation spells of your choice to your spellbook. Potent Cantrip now also works with cantrip attack rolls, not just saving throws. Okay. So, third level. At third level, you gain Evocation Savant. Choose 2 evocation spells from the arcane spell list, each of which must be no higher than second level. You add those spells to your spell book without needing to cast Scribe Spell. In addition, whenever you cast Scribe Spell to add a spell to your spell book, the gold cost and casting time you must spend to add an evocation spell to your spell book is halved, and then you get sculpt spells. You can create pockets of relative safety within the effects of your evocations. You cast an evocation spell that affects creatures other creatures that you can see. You could choose a number of them equal to 1 plus the spell's level. The chosen creatures automatically succeed on their saving throws against the spell, and they take no damage if they would normally take half damage on a successful save. Works pretty much the same way that the base Evoker does. 6th level, Potent Cantrip. Your damaging cantrips affect even creatures that avoid the brunt of the effect. When you cast a cantrip at a creature and you miss with the attack roll, or the target succeeds at a saving throw against the damage, the target takes half the cantrip's damage, if any, but suffers no additional effect from the cantrip. Pretty cool. I guess it's neat that they added that to attack rolls as well. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about that, but it doesn't really matter because it's just encouraging spellcasters to save spells more, cast cantrips more, which is bad for reasons that will appear in an upcoming video. 10th level Empowered Evocation. Whenever you cast an evocation spell from the arcane spell list, you can add your intelligence modifier to 1 damage roll of that spell. Cool. Once again, just to blast your caster. 14th level Overchannel. You maximize damage, and if you do it again, you take a whole bunch of necrotic damage. Wait a minute. If you use this feature again before you finish a long rest, you take 2d12 necrotic damage for each level of the spell immediately after you cast it. Each time you use this feature again before finishing a long rest, the necrotic damage per spell level increases by 1d12. This damage ignores resistance and immunity. Okay, pretty cool. Fine. So, let's look in chat here again. Let's see here. Mike Cobbler says they think I'm going to give it a 4 out of 10. 6 of Swords says I'm going to give it a 3 out of 10. Thunderchild says bronze, silver, gold, wood. Rondos22 says 7 out of 10. Red Squirtle says 1d6 out of 10. That's clever. Watsy has spoken. Mike Cobbler says, okay, so before I go on to the other comments, here is my rating. 7 out of 10. That is my rating. I may have looked. I know that I looked depressed while reading this, and am saddened at how terribly they've treated this class. But believe it or not, even though one of my primary criticisms of the improvement of this class is that they snuck in spells as class features, I I still think it is still a colossal improvement on the 5th edition wizard, because the 5th edition wizard was so terribly designed by way of Jeremy Crawford ruining all of the duration, nearly all of the duration spells. And whereas other classes had features like sorcery points or bardic inspiration or wild shape to make their spells or other abilities cooler, wizards got pretty much none of that. They got way more ribbon abilities, and the so-called not ribbon abilities that they did get were typically unimpressive. Oh, hey, we got 15 people in here. Folks, if you have not as of yet, please join our Discord and visit me on patreon.com/RubeJelly. You can find both of those in the description. On the Patreon, by the way, we have I guess I'll drop this document that I have up here where I've been redesigning some of the material up there. But on the docket for this week is diseases and curses that are meant to work as is in 5th edition without mostly changing how curses and diseases spell, or changing things that affect diseases and curses. Just a preset list that you folks can enjoy. But going back to this, the reason I say 7 out of 10 is because modifying your spells, scribing those spells, and then using the combination of these to create spells is still a market improvement, because we're starting from 0. We're starting at 1 out of 10. Any improvement is going to launch this into the stratosphere in comparison to the 5th edition wizard. This is the first class I've seen so far that is better. I do mean that. Objectively, from any perspective you could possibly imagine, better than its 5th edition counterpart. This is the first 1D&D class that is better than its 5th edition counterpart, because it was the worst designed class in 5th edition. Worse than the Ranger. I will say, however, that modify spell and create spell are obvious disappointments that could have been made so much better. I probably won't be made better. They'll ignore any feedback. Some people will just find it cool that they could change their spells a little bit. So any feedback to the contrary is just going to get washed away, and it's not worth providing feedback at this point, because this thing is going to be dead on arrival. But yeah, that's my review of the wizard. Let's see what you folks were saying. They didn't do anything to make signature spell more tempting to continue that high. The issue is that 5th edition is not tempting in general to continue that high. Runos22 says, how often does the average 5e player get to 18th level anyways? Virtually nobody. But the key here is really how many people get to above 7th level, which is when you get modify spell. Very few. Very few. Most campaigns last for 6 sessions. There's a reason I run West Marches in my Discord. That's the reason I don't do this other stuff. So, Dragon Pulse says he likes Barbarian. I remember enough about the 5e Wizard to really see much of a difference. There's really not much of a difference here. They just added the ability to change some of your spells a little bit. and that's it. Really, everything else in here from a gameplay perspective, things that are going to come up in session, is functionally nearly identical. Yeah, all this is unimpressive. I remember, okay, so there's a the person who designed Lancer is on Twitter called Abaddon or Abaddon, whichever it is. I remember them talking about the very first class Unearthed Arcana that we got, which was the expert. No, sorry, when we got the expert playtest, and they were making fun of. They were quote tweeting an interview with Jeremy Crawford, where he's just like excitedly telling you, "Yeah, there's this really cool new feature for the thief. You can jump with dexterity now." Yes, the kill 6 billion demons guy, and it was just so he was just laughing at Jeremy Crawford. It's like, this is the height of excitement, is that not that I could do a new thing, but that, or an interesting thing, but I can do an uninteresting thing in a new way now. And all I had to do in order to get this was to give up a class feature that could have been something cool. Whereas Paizo is like, yeah, your fighter can lift mountains. Hardcore parkour. More like mudcore parkour. Yeah, I play AD&D. Vertical Apex, if you will. Yeah, there you go. I and AD&D is more has honestly AD&D has more stuff to do than this, which again begs the question. Other than presentation and the fact that AD&D has some elements in it which are genuinely incomprehensible, why why would you play these? I know I gave it a 7 out of 10, but it's because it's improving on something that was absolute crap. Why would you play this? There were no changes to the concentration mechanic that I can see, which stopped me from having fun in this game. They eliminated a specific character fantasy that, again, relies on overlapping duration effects, and they added concentration to as many of those duration effects that they could find. They already did that in 5th edition. There were a few exceptions that basically made it through, and with the advent of 1D&D, they basically immediately started uh, cutting down on those. Oh, why would I play this? Alrighty, folks, we've been at this for 2.5 hours now. I was thinking of getting to some Twitter drama, which I thought might be funny. Let's see here. Are any of you folks, tell you what, let's end out on a high note. Are any of you folks familiar with a YouTube channel known as Black Lodge Games? No views. That can't be right. I know it's not no views.
Think about this earlier because
yeah, 176 views. Okay. Pathfinder Second Edition, your fighter can cut through dimensions. Yeah, it's pretty cool. It's very cultivation fantasy. You play this because it's the newest version of D&D, pretty much. Yep. Free. Mr. Baker's Dozen says, I think the post Dan Talks game was great on this subject. Take away all the tactical aspects of the game and lean into the rules light. Okay. So, we have a fellow here who is notoriously not familiar with the rules of first edition, or indeed any of the old school, or any really the progenitors of the hobby. Six of Swords says, I only know of them because you keep fighting with them. What was that? We're going to set this to 1.5 speed. Now, I have not watched this, but I have responded to the thread. So we're just going to dick around for the last 10 minutes here.
We talk about role playing games 24/7 basically. But I felt the need to make a longer form response to this because this got me thinking quite a bit more broadly about GMing philosophy and role playing philosophy. I am relatively new to the OSR. I came up on AD&D Second Edition back when I was too young to really get much out of it, for sure. And for a long time, I've been interested in coming back and doing a more old school style D&D game and seeing what are the things that have been kind of lost to time, or at least lost to the popular consciousness.
It's so fascinating for him to frame this way because he basically craps all over every single thing that has been lost to time. So, one-to-one timekeeping. I don't know if he's crapped on that specifically, but our argument obviously was over XP versus one gold piece equaling 1 XP, or XP for gold as it's more commonly called. I recently saw them crapping over reaction rolls. Our fight specifically was over whether or not dungeons made sense in the game, which seemed pretty ridiculous, but it's funny to hear this person frame things this way.
From older editions of D&D. And so YouTube and its algorithmic magic has been serving me up lots of OSR content. And that's, how I found Basic Expert. But today, Basic Expert posted this thread about reaction rolls in these games. And while I have found a lot of interesting ideas in the OSR that I basically have been like, oh, okay, I can totally incorporate this into my games, and it totally makes sense. The reaction roll is not one of them. And before we get started, I hate that I even have to say this. There's been so much fucking drama on Twitter recently. This is not a takedown or anything like that. This is literally, I want to have a conversation about this. So if you guys are involved in this thread, or you just find this topic interesting and you have a YouTube channel, I'd be interested to see video responses to this because I think that there is a longer form conversation to be had than 280 characters at a time. I actually, even prepping this video, I had some trouble finding the relevant kind of responses I wanted to go through because of the insane threading on Twitter. when you say something, everybody can respond, and then you're responding to their responses, and it's hard to even track down the relevant parts of the conversation.
Side note: I should have watched this beforehand, but that's fine. This is mostly stuff that's going to be cut out of the video on demand.
But the reaction roll is something that I have kind of a visceral gut reaction against in a lot of circumstances. Not all. Like I said in this first response that I said to him, I said I think reaction rolls make sense for a lot of random encounters, but most of the time I have a good enough idea of how my NPCs think that when the PCs are trying to persuade them, adding a random element to the reaction doesn't make much sense. And my only kind of real exposure to reaction rolls in mechanics of games has been in Lion and Dragon, which I may open the PDF in a moment to look over. And I can see the use for it. Like, let me just open the PDF real quick. In this section, basically the relevant parts are here, for at least the relevant parts of this discussion. Pundit says, note that a reaction roll can be used also in the case of wild animals or monsters to determine whether in a random wilderness encounter the creature automatically attacks a PC or group of PCs. This makes sense to me. It makes sense for, encountering groups of monsters, encountering a group of bandits if this is a randomly generated event. Just getting an immediate pulse check on, what's their disposition towards the players. And cue off of that, improvise based on that. I get that. But when you're engaging in conversation with NPCs, this doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me. Because what...
All right, so we're going to get to my response now because we get back to the thing that I initially fought with these guys over, which is that they like to set the ceiling for discussion at their room temperature IQ. Things do not make sense to me, and therefore they should not be included. And this is, so now we get down to my Twitter response. I said that, actually, no, we're going to go to the thread unroll, because it's going to be much easier to view. So I said, this sometimes makes sense, but mocking him, but I can make the NPCs make sense on my own. And now all quick descriptions of why the NPC is hostile now make sense, why they're being antagonistic, if it just makes sense. If it makes sense, I can justify it. I can make them hostile, provided it makes sense. And now all NPCs in hostile locations or negotiations or that have any reason to be antagonistic or just not helpful to you are hostile. Congratulations. And I quoted something that I had written ages ago, saying, something I've dealt with in Aaron server is the idea, Aaron the Pedantic server, go subscribe to him, is that knowing the primary reason a rule was implemented will shield you from all of the second order consequences of removing it. So I'm quoting a person here that said, the original context of strict time measurements in D&D was about facilitating West Marches style play. It wasn't about anything else. And I followed this up, of course, with a thread about the advantages that timekeeping brought, one-to-one time, Jeffro-Gygaxian timekeeping, brought to people in small campaigns with only one group or a small roster of players and characters. And the contents of the thread later made it into my video on the subject, one-to-one time, which was my first video. And the thing I learned from this was that I sort of talked myself through was, oh yeah, people don't really care about the mechanic. They don't care about the effects of the mechanic. They don't speak from a position of, here is how it makes the game better, and here is how it makes the game worse, by and large. And this guy, I haven't watched the video. Maybe this guy got to that. He ran away from another debate challenge. I saw that he commented on about 3 of my posts or whatever, saying that he didn't delete comments. I took screenshots of the comment section so that I could show, yes, he deleted my comment. My comment, I think, still appears in the live chat, which includes my Discord ad. I included my Discord ad and said, like, come on, let's do the debate thing. If you want to call me a moron on stream, let's do it. So he's run twice at this point. It's not going to happen. But the realization I came to, proved to myself more or less, was that these people just don't care about the mechanics. They're looking for an excuse to remove it, which is why they always bring up, like, well, the original purpose of this was, like, some other thing. I'm not doing that thing, so I could just take it out. And it's like, no, but the mechanic has a bunch of other second-order effects. And here's where we get to Black Lodge Games. He said reaction rolls. I think reaction rolls make sense for a lot of random encounters, but most of the time, I have a good enough idea of how my NPCs think that when PCs are trying to persuade them, adding a random element to the reaction doesn't make much sense to me. Arguing from sense truly is the best way for these RPG varmints to talk shop. The end-all be-all for conversation is whether something flies over their head. They never have to trust the process, never have to see the outcomes of mechanics they don't understand. The common North American gutter nerd doesn't have to explain where a mechanic made their game better or worse, only a rough outline of where their tumbleweed-infested scroll down. Head decided to short circuit. Who needs to talk session reports, second order consequences of a mechanic, or the necessity of some gameplay interaction when y'all can instead loudly announce you're dumb? You'll get praised for it. Take the example here, reaction rolls. See, reaction rolls are not really there to help a GM who doesn't know how monsters will react in a dungeon. There ain't a GM alive who doesn't have the default answer in mind. Everything is hostile. Easy. But that's why the reaction rolls are in there. That's why the reaction roll is available to you, required for use, because what you have in mind is bad. The game knows such a campaign would be unfulfilling, wouldn't take advantage of the medium and referee, and was, broadly speaking, an outlet for the sorts of dumb meat grinders the DMG rips to shreds. The point of using reaction rolls is to stop you from using the worthless sense y'all are so proud of. Some monsters don't attack, some might make friends, some might be friendly from the get. This mechanic helps to illuminate a world beyond your head. The game doesn't want the campaign to live inside the referee's head. The game already knows what kind of mediocre experience such a campaign would produce. The game wants the campaign to be larger than life, larger than any one person can truly comprehend, because that's what makes the campaign the most enjoyable for the greatest number of playstyles, for the greatest number of people. Stop inventing problems for solutions that anticipated your soft skull's sins 50 years in advance. You can follow me at Rube Jelly on Twitter. So that was my response. Let's look at some of the comments while we go over this. Bradford Walker says this person needs to be told to shut up and lurk more until he sees how the machine works and gets why it is as it is. At least read the PDF first. Authoritative News Network ads. Let's see here. Just call everyone stupid while completely missing their points. How is strict timekeeping not about resource management? Time doesn't become a resource until you do timekeeping. How do you know what your NPCs think until you use their reaction roll? Well, that's the thing is, if you just use, well, guys, I will just be all the NPCs, and I will just adjudicate all of them fairly, and I will maintain hundreds of separate personalities, and they will never bleed in, and I, who run all of the hostile characters in the campaign, will surely not suffer any bleed from one NPC to another. All merchants will have an equal fair shot at playing at bartering with you, or they all have an equal fair shot at being talked down off a financial cliff. All the bouncers and guards have an equal shot at you persuading them to let you in. All of the kings and noblemen have an equal shot at you persuading them to move troops around or to avoid attacking something or to support you in attacking something. But I do wonder if all of them really do have an equal shot. All of them really do have an equal shot at having a fair, balanced reaction, such that some of them are going to be friendly from the get, some of them are going to be conditionally friendly, some of them are going to be neutral, passive, not engaged, and some of them are going to be hostile. If only there were some way to verify that the game was really being fair. If only there was something that the PCs knew was available to them, that they didn't have control over, but they could demand the GM use. What would such a mechanic look like? Would we use such a mechanic? Would we want to use such a mechanic? Well, if you really were so fair that the proper chances for success, failure, hostility, friendliness, neutrality, conditional friendliness, conditional hostility were all fairly represented at the table, why wouldn't you use a mechanic for it? And to me, the clear answer is, and the reason as to why it breaks the immersion of this person, is because the reaction roll, which is fair, accurately, and fairly represents the chances of a relationship swinging one way or another at the table, produces different results from what this person's NPCs produce. Because he's not fair. Or, sorry, when he eventually runs a game, it will not be fair. It will not accurately represent the chances of certain people being hostile and certain people being friendly. Probably, it produces people who are friendly too often, which is to say, once or twice, so that the party didn't have to brown nose and really beg for it all the time. This person to be friendly. The reason this person has an issue with the subject is because the game knows better. And they don't know how to roleplay somebody that they expected to be hostile, being friendly. They don't know how to roleplay an orc or troll in the dungeon, being friendly to the party. Because it doesn't make sense to them. But in this person's mind, if it doesn't make sense up here, that means up there is wrong. The game You could see this PDF that he's looking at. That means the game is wrong. It doesn't make sense to him up here, who has not used this mechanic, is not practiced with it, is not familiar with its effects on a campaign, and is not even able to argue as such. Well, he might get to it somewhere in the video. I won't be around to find out. It's an issue with the game. It's not an issue up here. He's starting from the conclusion, remember. He's working backwards from the idea that if a game produces an event that he's not familiar with or didn't expect, that can't be right. This is my little novel that I'm writing out. That can't be right. This troll can't be friendly. Why would a troll be friendly? I can't think of a reason as to why a troll would be friendly. So something is wrong with the game. It's not that I'm new to the skill of improvisation, or new to the skill of developing a milieu, or complex relationships between people, and complex motivations, or circumstances between people. Me personally, I've been GMing for the better part of a decade now. Or sorry, no, I've been GMing for like 5 years. I've been playing for the better part of a decade now. And so when somebody asks me like, oh, well, there's an orc and a troll in here and it says they're friendly, it's like, okay, well, they're cooking food. They see people on the other side. They're hungry, and the food's right in front of them. And maybe they smell some food on you and they say, maybe we could get more food out of these guys. So they invite you to come sit down and more easily add to their meal so they could share it a little bit more. They could share in a larger meal and maybe get bigger portions out of it. And I could just come up with stuff like that on the fly. There's a friendly troll in the dungeon. Well, why is it friendly? Because it's running from a behir. It's running from a red dragon or something, right? It's running from something that's bigger than it. And I could use the same justification for making that troll hostile, by the way. I could say that the troll running from the behir, running from the red dragon, is hostile because it's intent on throwing PCs behind it so that it can escape, and the PCs represent a potential block. Or maybe it assumes that the PCs are working for the behir, for the dragon. Yeah. No, thank you. Mr. Baker's Dozen 2020 says, LOL, that's because you're actually creative, Rube. This is not to flatter myself, but yes, creativity is partially a skill, right? You could be a naturally creative person that has never written a book. I could have turned out to be a quote unquote naturally creative person that just thought about things a lot, but never actually produced something. But no, like I've written a fantasy novel. I've written a dozen supplements for D&D now. I've written my own mini RPG zine, Seven Willows. You guys will be able to buy that, I think, at the end of the week on Drive-Thru RPG. I'm pretty excited about that. I'm so yeah. So I'm not just a creative person, but I engage in creative production a lot. And because I've built something from soup to nuts in not just one, but several different creative mediums, I understand what it's like to get into the bones of the creative process and wrench around with things that might need to be adjusted for my purposes. I've actually run campaigns with reaction rolls in them. So I understand, and I'm a very creatively fluent person, which again is not bragging. It's partially genetic, apparently. So I have no right to brag. I just try to use it to other people's benefit, which is something I could brag about. But we're not going to spend too much time on it. So I can not just use these mechanics, because Randos22 in the chat here is right. You don't actually need to be creative to use these things. I think the where the creativity comes in is where I am able to express why mechanics like these are important and what games look like when they don't have these mechanics, because it's not purely a descriptive process. You have to be able to go outside your own head a little bit to imagine things outside your own head in order to compare a game that has a mechanic that you don't like but does something good and compare it to a game that doesn't have that mechanic but maybe also doesn't have the good things that that mechanic that, again, you don't like might not feature in the campaign. And this is difficult for people. This is too difficult for people. So,
What I'm looking for out of role playing games is maybe not what everyone else is looking for. The thing that I like out of role playing games is
oh man,
the
that's
role
the most
play
honest thing
itself.
that you've
And
said.
no, I'm not. I did study theater, but I am not some thespian gamer. I am not one of these people who likes to
Don't be
write
shy.
their
Yes,
game
you
as a
are.
novel and have the players play out the pre-planned adventure. By any means, no. I improvise the entire time. I essentially come up with a kind of a few scenes.
So this is an interesting note that actually made me think, because this person is not a story gamer in the sense that they have a preset plot and they have a preset of events, a preset set of events that players have to play through. This is the sort of story gamer that produces or that story games by modifying the bounding boxes of the game, of the random events that the game will produce. And by getting, well, this is why they require so much session prep, is because they have to take away a lot of the random elements out of the game, such that if the PCs succeed, they will go through a set path. But if the PCs fail, then they go back a step in whatever the story is. And if they go back a step in whatever the story is, that's pretty easy to account for if you're a story gamer. If they fail at something that really they're supposed to succeed at some point, it's still pretty easy to account for. But if they succeed at something that you weren't prepared for them to succeed at, or at the very least that they didn't have to struggle through, all of a sudden that diminishes the you're less prepared for the story that you're supposed to take people through. So what people like this do is they shrink the bounding boxes of play. They flatten the gameplay that's available to people. So if you're playing Lion and Dragon and there's a critical moment, it's really important that the PCs work and struggle and beg and brown nose and bribe the port authority into letting them smuggle something onto a ship because it's important to save the city or whatever. If that port authority rolls friendly on the reaction roll, there goes your plans. If they if they fail to convince the port authority at first, and therefore they fail, and then go back later and try to figure out another way to succeed, another way to get through this hard, what's referred to in video game design as a hard gate. Once you go through this, the gameplay state changes. You can't go back through it, but obviously, but you could linger for plenty of time before you actually pass the threshold of this hard gate. But once you actually pass it, then gameplay state changes. That's fine for him. He doesn't mind if the players spend another week trying to convince the port authority, because that's another week of prep that he gets to do. And it's easy. It's within the bounding boxes. But again, if the reaction roll turns up 12, if it turns up friendly for this port authority, he doesn't know what to do.
For my session prep is basically coming up with a few scenes that I think are might plausibly happen in the opening of the game, coming up with hooks, and then seeing where the players go with that, which inevitably is always in directions that I didn't anticipate, and that's the fun. That's where we get the interesting experiences, because you become immersed in the game. The players, in my opinion, are there basically to create a character, play their character and stay in character as much as they can during the experience, to try to play out what this human being is, how they would act in the world as presented by the GM, within the constraints of whatever genre that you're playing in. So obviously, if you're playing in something like Lion and Dragon, your characters are not going to act remotely like they would in a science fiction game, or something that's more gonzo fantasy, something that's going to be like more wild. That already puts constraints on how people should play, in my opinion. But my problem with the reaction roll is that I don't see myself as a neutral referee in the game world as a GM. I also don't see myself, like Pundit on his stream recently was talking about how basically the game master should attempt to set in motion this be the clockwork god. You create this world, this engine that sets events in motion, and you allow this to kind of procedurally generate and simulate the world. I am much closer to that style of GMing than I am.
Can we just, in the chat, those of you who are in the chat, and those of you who have not commented yet, just say this is your time to tell me I was right. To tell me that I had predicted everything he was going to say, despite having not watched this video. And you guys could see when I clicked on the video that there was no bar of progress. That I had not watched this video, and I had still predicted everything that this person was going to say anyways. Because stupidity is banal and predictable. Sometimes I surprise even myself.
Am whatever it is that the new gamer, the millennial 5e crowd does. But I have a
the millennial
very
5e
solid
crowd.
sense of how NPCs act, the various characters that I am role playing. Because as a game master, I am not simply a referee. I am also a participant in this world. I am role playing all of the other people that they interact with, that the players interact with. And I don't know if this is just because I have a relatively high degree of empathy. I can easily put myself in the shoes of another person and think, how would this person act under this situation?
No, I'm not going to.
But the kind of more fundamental problem I'm finding here is that
I actually restricted myself for once.
You're randomly determining the disposition of whoever it is. And they are very general. I understand we're not, this isn't a random table of dialogue options that are...
I'm I'm in your chat! Black Lodge Games, I'm in your chat! I'm filling the chat with bad vibes so I can harm you. Cause you psychic pain.
Are triggered by the rolls. I get that. The point is to have this general disposition and then weave that into the game and make...
Oh, you almost said story. I know why you hesitated there. Black Lodge Games. You almost said story. It was on the tip of your tongue.
Make it make sense, improvise based on it, and possibly provide some degree of the unexpected even for the GM. My problem is that introducing randomness into this...
introducing the unexpected?
You're introducing randomness into something that is not random.
Oh! He's got it all on lock. Like I said, every single personality, the hundreds of people that the PCs will come across in the course of their game. He has each personality down pat, separate. The fact that he runs all of the monsters and all of the antagonistic challenges will in no way, perish the thought, will in no way bleed into how he runs PCs that should otherwise be friendly or favorable, or neutral, or undecided, or highly favorable. And of course, is not going to produce any differences. Is not going to produce any differences between the fairness of running the game and the fairness of using this mechanic and the fairness that this person can surely manage. Where they keep these 200 people in their head and separate at the same time. And I mentioned this earlier at the beginning of the show, which was okay, let's say that is the case. Let's say that you are a true schizophrenic who can manage this height of thespian roleplay and in the game and in no way interferes with the fairness. Why not just use the mechanic anyways then so that the player characters know that you are being fair? The only reason you wouldn't is because you're not actually at the height of fairness. You're not actually at the height of thespian roleplay. The mechanic produces different results than your fairness in quotes produces at the table. You do skew towards hostile, negative, neutral at best. You don't include challenges where people are favorable or highly favorable. When is the last time, Black Lodge Games, when is the last time players came across a NPC that they expected to be a challenge or they expected they would have to bribe or persuade or something like that, and he just agreed with them right off the bat? When's the last time that event occurred in your game? Or do you, rather, as is more likely the case, try to wring as much challenge and antagonism and stalled progress into the cup of your players as you possibly can when it comes to NPC interactions? All right, get a bunch of fun things in here. Aaron the Pedantic says, "Hey, Aaron, nice to see you, buddy." See here. He doesn't understand the point of trying to be unbiased and how calculated randomness actually aids in verisimilitude. You know what? He could have easily used this mechanic to say, okay, I'm going to make the Port Authority, I'm going to make the Harbor Master, I'm going to make the captain of the ship, I'm going to make his first mate, and I'll make the wives of all these characters as well. And could have said, well, I'm not going to do it in the middle of the game because I'm not ready for that. But in that prep time that he's obsessed with, what he could have done was rolled these reaction rolls in advance and built the NPCs around there. If it doesn't make sense to you to do it in the middle of the game, that's fine. Because that does not preclude you from using the mechanic. But it is mandatory that you use the mechanic, because otherwise, the play experience flattens to results 2 through 8 on this chart here, and results 9 through 12 do not make it into the game. And until results 9 through 12 make it into the game, the chart is better than you at deciding the reactions of NPCs. And if you say, but I promise I can eventually get to the point where I can be as good or perhaps even better than the chart, use the chart. Just use the chart. You haven't used it in play. You don't know how it works. It's 2d6 and a little bit of thought. If you really struggle to imagine it and say it doesn't make sense, or it doesn't make sense to you, put it into ChatGPT if you're struggling this bad. That's not out of the question, I don't think. Does it not make sense to the AI? That's the real question about, does this make sense or does this not make sense? Put it into the computer. Does it say, I don't understand? Or does it take 3 seconds to spit out a plausible answer that you believe came from a human being? All right. Thunderchild said, first, Jack Kingsbury. Jack Kingsbury says, the reaction roll isn't for you, it's for the NPC. It determines how well they react to the NPC. This person doesn't understand it. It doesn't make sense to them. Thunderchild says, this man with his high degree of empathy and no theatrical history is far more capable than I of automating his game. Aaron the Pedantic says, he did say he doesn't see himself as a neutral arbiter. He did admit to it. That's the funny part. He hasn't had a player ever. Bakers doesn't. Are you from Black Lodge Games stream? Out of curiosity, is that where we met you first? 'Cause I really am curious as to whether or not he's run a. Supposedly, he hasn't run a campaign yet. Thunderchild asks, "Why does this man ever roll dice? He should decide. He should always decide 2 hit and damage." Oh, yes, that's the problem, isn't it? And he would say, "Well, 2 hit and damage. Like we're not all combat experts, and even if we were, arguing about who would hit and who would not hit is way more tedious and tiresome than just rolling a die." And if I was really obsessed with, and what he wouldn't say, but he would think, is that if he was really obsessed with hitting the players all the time, he could just organize the bounding boxes of play such that the PCs hit all the time. Uh, so when it comes to social reactions, again, it's well, I'm so empathetic, I'm so thespian, it's my theater background, etc., etc. And I can assure you that I would do XYZ. But when you say fair and balanced, if it doesn't match up with this chart here, I don't believe you. Until you use that chart and demonstrate your capacity to use it, your capacity to extrapolate the results to the play scenario, then why on earth would I believe you? Just do the damn mechanic first. See how it plays out. Fail against the mechanic first, as I know that you're terrified of doing, but are going to do anyways, and then are going to produce a worse game in your attempt to avoid it. Try it and fail first. It's that let go of this stupid ego thing that you have going on. Probably sounds ironic from me. Oh, Ranos, when I when I said that in the chat, I was quoting you because I had the at Aaron of Pedantic in there. Your comment has gone unstolen, I assure you. Brendan says, I mean, assuming he does actually have a game, then I'm fairly sure his combat encounters are probably kabuki theater. GM not using the Mr. Baker does Baker's. That's pretty good. Mr. Baker's Dozen 2020 says, a GM not using the tools they have because I don't understand it is a bad GM. Yeah, I'm happy saying that. If you say, I don't know how to use this right now, I literally just don't know how to turn this into the part of the game right now, that's one thing. But reaction rolls are pretty self-explanatory. And it's because they're self-explanatory. And it's because they produce rules that he doesn't like, that he has an issue with it. I have an article on my website. That's, Aaron, what this man is about running away. I've challenged him twice now and called him out on the first dodge and now the second one, so I guess he's not coming on my stream. You might be able to get your hooks into him. I was really surprised when I saw you following these people to begin with. So, I have an article on my website that called. Actually, you know what? Let's just look at it. Can't the GM just decide? Yes, there we go. And it came up on a discussion of weather at first. Because somebody in my Discord, I was making a weather system. Somebody asked, well, while I was doing so, I saw feedback. One of my buddies suggested the following. And he suggested, or he said he would suggest, do not roll for weather. Figure out what would be appropriate for the region and base what the weather is on that. Here's a table if you really want to determine it randomly. Now, this is fine, okay? But for... All right, we're reconnected. I think we're reconnected. Reconnection really successful. That took ages. That was annoying. If it happens again, we'll shut down the stream because we're going towards the end anyways. So I wanted cool weather events. And I knew that you can't just throw a tornado at the party. It doesn't like a if that kills a tornado is a deadly event. So if you kill a bunch of people with a tornado, it's just you, the GM, pointing at them and saying, "Oh, this character, this character, this character dies." Right? So that wouldn't work. So I had to make it fair, and because I knew I had to make it fair, and because I wanted to be a feature in the game, because I knew really what would happen is that if a tornado killed three of the people in the party, that a GM would just never use it. Or a sandstorm with a dragon in it. I'm glad you remember that. I enjoyed that fight. I so the what was it? Yeah. So oh, this is what I said. If I'm going to toss in events like this, which can chaotically interact with the party, I want them to be random. I don't want the players to see the GM's hand in setting them up, or for the GM to get nervous about deploying a cool weather effect and ignoring the system altogether. The dice did it. Oh well, can we chuck the cabbage cart into the tornado? Because this is the thing. Game masters are not game designers. Let me clarify, I'm not quoting the article, because there are all sorts of very stupid arguments that arise from that statement. Game masters are not the same kind of designers that actual game designers are. Their design differs in time, quality, focus, scope, scale, and any number of other modifiers to say with absolute confidence they are using different skill sets. There is an overlap, yes, but there's also overlap between being a player and a designer, and being a player and a GM. We wouldn't say all players are designers more than we would say all players are GMs. So when real designers determine they want something to in some way debut in a game, they make it a feature of the game. They don't just leave it blank. Yes, the GM can decide to implement that feature, but the GM can implement lots of features and choose to do so based on time, preference, perceived reception at their table, their perceived competence, very important in this discussion, in making the feature functional and entertaining, etc. So if you want them to prioritize one over another, it should in some way feature in the game. Maybe you didn't need to do this back in the 70s when folks were reading the Chronicles of Amber and the Dying Earth and who knows what else. If you had similar backgrounds and cultural touchstones in common with whoever would run this thing, it's a little easier to expect things which aren't actually in the rule books to make an appearance nonetheless. But we don't live in that culture. We have to use the shortcut. Using an example that somebody mentioned in the chat earlier today, I said, let's say technically speaking, GMs don't need to make an attack roll. They don't. They can just decide based on whatever the hell they please at the time the attacker hits or misses. Now they can also just decide that some are sufficiently up to random chance to warrant making a roll. But if you as a designer want everyone to resolve attacks with the dice as a default, what do? You write it into the game. You tell the GM that attacks are resolved by rolling a d20 and adding a modifier. You tell the GM that's what's expected of them, because that's what everyone who doesn't need an excuse to throw out the rulebook whenever they want to play will expect when they show up at the table. And this is the kill shot here. This person requires throwing out the rulebook in order to play. They're not willing to sit down at a campaign and just see how it plays out once. They can't even give it a fair shake. They start off from the assumption that no, this person who's never played before is truly a game designer. Which is why in the stream that we hosted, criticizing their stream, in which they called me a moron throughout the entirety of it, was wiped out by a single page of the first edition Dungeon Master's Guide, page 90, on economics and monster placement, which went like almost point by point all of the things that they were criticizing. Oh, well, there should be taxes in this game. Why aren't there taxes? There are taxes in the game. In fact, Gary recommends like get rid of excess gold at all costs if you possibly can. Why aren't there? Well, I guess all. I guess all coins are just this mono denomination A. It's like no, Gary has procedures for managing foreign coins. and what will happen to them, and the markup that is paid on foreign coins as opposed to domestic coins. So this person just doesn't know what they're entering the hobby in pretty much the worst possible fashion, where they say, I'm here for some old school play, here for back how they did it in the day. They say, well, I don't like being told that uh, something could happen without my permission. Is there a way to fix that? Could I redesign this game so that that didn't happen? Back to some comments, and then we're going to close out here. He said, "At least someone did." No, I definitely did enjoy that fight. That was good. Ambush predator. You guys walking into a sandstorm. Perfect. Rano says that as someone who works outside part of the day, it is interesting there aren't better random weather generation in tabletop RPGs. Bad weather really sucks. Yeah, it does. You should consider buying Chilmus Valley when it releases. Thunderchild. Actually, you know what? I'm gonna put the. I've been talking about it long enough. All right, this week, in addition to the curses and diseases for patreon.com/Rube Jelly, I'm going to put up the weather events for let's say 3 biomes. Hey, we got new people. I'm happy about this. We got new people. You guys should add to that at patreon.com/ I shouldn't look at those. Oh, cool. /Rube Jelly. It is a 5th edition supplement, but the weather events are going to be pretty easy to swing in similar games. So if you're playing 1st edition, if you're playing 2nd edition, if you're playing 4th edition, even, you'd be able to translate these fairly easily. Ditto for Pathfinder 2nd edition. Thunderchild says, I played a random weather generator campaign. I was a druid. I was so ready for a bad weather day encounter so I could use Call Lightning. You know what? The it's funny you mentioned that, because in the Chilmus Valley test campaign, obviously because it's the West Marches, because it's a grand campaign, people, and we're playing with one-to-one time, a lot of the people in there have multiple different characters. And as a result, the number of druids and monks was insane. And we have one druid in particular who every single time that they have even thought to cast Call Lightning, because the weather events were set, and there is a bias towards when you're traveling, when you're journeying out in the wilderness, there is a bias towards negative weather events, especially in certain biomes like Underdark Spires, such. Cast Call Lightning, and it was always during inclement weather, meaning that they had some extra storm clouds to take advantage of, and they got extra damage out of it. I remember the last time that happened, he's like, "Ooh, I'm gonna cast it at an even higher level now," because for whatever reason, knowing that he got that extra D8 meant that he wanted a whole bunch of extra D8s. So he was going to cast it at 5th level instead of 3rd, and got, let's see here, I think it's normally 3d10 3rd level, so he cast at 5th level. So that would be 5d10, but it was stormy weather, so we got 60. Yeah, it was 60-10 sounds about right for the spell he was casting. Bias towards negative weather. Does your campaign take place in Wisconsin? No, it's England. It was raining there. Seattle. But no, that's this one. It's because good weather isn't just like no effect. Good weather is specifically very positive effect. That's handy for folks who are doing whatever. So that was the idea. All right. My jaw is tired. We've been going over 3 hours. And I think it's about time to close out. Anybody have any questions? How did you guys enjoy yourselves? We got a lot of different viewers in this one. I was shocked. Sent a message. discussing something with somebody about a certain mech-focused tactics game. My first foray into video games, getting very excited about this. Alrighty. So, let's see. A possible stream on Pathfinder 2nd Edition Remastered. Something I've wanted to do for a hot minute, and I think once I get stuff settled with my editor, who I think is in the chat right now, I think once we get that settled and we could agree on certain videos that we would like to that we think would be fun to release and stuff like that, I think a stream on like a 5th edition, we would probably title it 5th edition designers reaction to Pathfinder 2nd edition. And then once I did that, we could do a stream on Pathfinder 2nd edition remastered. Or maybe depending on how long that took, how much time that took, we would go into we would just skip to remastered. So that's going to be a lot of fun. I find that encouraging. Jeez, what else do I have to do today? No, you know what? I got a little bit of extra work on Seven Willows coming out because we have that sweet, sweet PDF upcoming, baby. Oh God, the people who replied to this were so stupid. And current viewers, why did it just shoot back up to 13 again? What the hell is wrong with you people? We're at the end of the stream. All right, I'll read out some extra tweets while I'm here. I have a second thought. Let's see here. Yeah, there was nothing in my thread suggesting you must always use reaction rolls. The thread is about why your game is worse without these mechanics, and the rhetorical loops an inexperienced ref or someone like Black Lodge Games who hasn't read the rule books they love to talk about will use to trick themselves into not using the mechanics. About half of my thread is dedicated to a game that doesn't live in the GM. The half of my thread that dedicated to a game that doesn't live in the GM's mind is about this. A true tabletop campaign is about more than your pre-planned NPC reactions or a fully developed map. The unknown is what drives a campaign to the heights of this medium. Mechanics, which reveal the unknown, unite the table in anticipation and excitement. The joy of eagerly looking to see what happens next. And it's a shame that the Department of Nuance and Sense always fails to understand this very simple point. Reminds me, what's Black Lodge Games up to? Aaron, I hope you do get to chat with them. This is the only response I could get out of these people. It's just memes. He just sends memes back. Whenever we're talking, whenever it's a platform that we're both on at the same time, it's just like these boomer TikTok memes. He just keeps running away. Oh well, folks. Seeing some of these guys almost makes me glad Elon won't let me back on Twitter. All right, you know what? That's probably a good place to stop. Okay, folks. Thank you so much for joining in. Thank you so much for hanging out. I enjoyed this lovely little stream here. We're going to be doing more of them in the upcoming weeks. I just need to fix up some of my final projects here. Jack Kingsbury says, I love generating results at the table. It's fun to be surprised right along with the players. Absolutely. That's what the stream, not this stream was about, but I guess the last probably hour or so of it. We've been running for about 3.5 hours, so hopefully if I do get to chat, if the editor is down for it, I think there's a lot of good clips in here. Well, folks, without further ado, make sure to subscribe if you haven't already. Patreon.com/RubeJelly if you want to support the channel. Just $3 a month. And make sure to join our Discord in the description. I will see you folks later. Yes, hit the like button! You're